Pressing his palms to the ground, the young man felt that he had finally adapted to the element of soil. He saturated the brick of the inn with mana and recreated its entire structure in his memory for a future spell. Magic reassembled the building anew, and the shining inn confirmed the success of the bold experiment. Long before this, the hero came to his senses as a powerless infant, and a young woman hurried to his crying. Seeing the smiling beauty, the baby at first thought he had woken up in a hospital until she offered him food. His own hunger burst out in loud crying, and the woman immediately took the child under her care. With a single finger movement, the stranger lit the light, stunning the infant with real magic. The magical glow finally convinced the boy that after death, he had been reborn in another world. While the mother fed and soothed him, the new body itself reached for food despite adult consciousness. The infant greedily clung to the mother, and the joy of a second life momentarily overcame shame. Having eaten and burped, the boy realized that this young woman was his mother. He lived as the third nameless son of Ashira and Mari, since names were given here only at a church ceremony at 6 years old. Lying in the cradle, the baby became increasingly interested in magic, which seemed a familiar part of the new world. The mother again created light above her finger, and the attentive gaze of the son clung to every movement of the spell. Waving his tiny hands, the boy already imagined how he would conquer magical power himself. Imagination carried him through fire, water, wind, ice, and lightning, although his body still did not obey. Unwilling to wait for growing up, the infant froze in the cradle and tried to cast a spell immediately. He desperately stretched his hand forward, but instead of magic, he only exhausted himself and began to cry. The mother ran at the voice and calmed the child, finally interrupting his unsuccessful experiment. After the first failure, the boy changed his plan and decided to first spy on how his family cast spells. When the mother again summoned a light orb, the son noticed an invisible stream coming from her body that he had not seen before. Observation suggested to him that this energy was mana and served as the basis of any spell. Over 3 years, the boy studied his mother's mana daily, although his undeveloped voice still did not allow him to pronounce spells. Having grown strong enough to walk independently, he set out to seek energy in his own body and train it. The family's poverty left the 3-year-old boy constantly hungry, and magic still eluded him. It was hunger that forced him to go to the abandoned field and decide to grow his own food at any cost. Among the plants, he saw mana in the air and realized that it could be combined with internal energy. Breathing in the external mana deeply, the boy began carefully mixing it with the power in his body. Prolonged exercises allowed him to gather both flows in the lower dantian and purify them almost effortlessly. However, without a name, he could only hope for simple everyday magic, so he still had to wait 3 more years for the ceremony. Kneeling before the ground, the boy repeated the movements he had practiced through numerous trials and errors. This time, the earth responded to his touch for the first time, and mana flows stirred around his body. Focusing, he slowly merged the external and internal mana in the lower dantian. The energy rose to his chest, spread to his head and limbs, then closed a smooth circle throughout his body. The excess purified mana gathered in his palms, and the boy carefully poured it into the dry earth. A powerful stream splashed around him, forcing the young sorcerer to tense to the limit. Carelessly spoken spells stirred the mana, but the boy maintained concentration and did not let the power break free from control. The invested energy spread across the field in a wide wave, giving him a chance to change the exhausted soil. To complete the transformation, he cast aside fear and recreated in his memory the necessary image of the land. In his thoughts arose a soft, fertile field with good drainage, sunny warmth, and an abundance of nutrients. The boy imagined loose, plowed earth without weeds and almost felt its rich scent. The memory of his grandmother's fertilized garden added warmth and minerals to the image, which the local field lacked. Sweat dripped from his hands as mana soaked the soil and gradually changed its properties. Even exhausted, the boy did not lift his palms from the ground and continued to saturate the entire plot with it. The cause of the decline was the Great War, because of which almost all able-bodied men had to leave the village. Among the armed squad, the boy noticed his father and silently watched as he set off again on a dangerous campaign. Endless wars took people and resources, so the technologies of the new world remained pitifully primitive. The hero understood that peace would allow the peasants to expand fields, increase harvests, and develop crafts. When the father disappeared along with the detachment, the mother noticed the son's gloom and gently touched his shoulder. She comforted the boy by saying that the father had left home before, but this time the anxiety did not subside. The boy looked at the generous harvest and became increasingly convinced that the field magic he had created was of great importance. Walking among the dense ears, he realized that the high yield was especially beneficial because of the tax that depended on the area of cultivated land. But the thought of poorly equipped peasants who could be sent to war made him think about protecting people, although memories of his past life did not allow him to easily accept killing. To prepare for a possible war, the young mage decided first of all to acquire weapons, armor, and money. Imagining a pile of coins and reliable equipment, he realized how expensive his plan would be. Seeing peasants exchanging potatoes for 20 stalks, the boy was upset because ordinary barter did not give him cash. Realizing that it was almost impossible to earn coins in the village, he decided to rely on a traveling merchant. The mother suggested that the boy earn money by making sandals. She showed footwear made from dried 20 stalks that could be sold, and the proceeds spent on necessary things, but the boy immediately noticed the low efficiency of such work. When various sandals were laid out before him, he saw how the merchant determined the price of each pair. Learning that his mother wove sandals daily for sale, the boy recognized this method as a reliable source of coins. The merchant carefully examined the sandal made by the boy and highly appreciated the quality of the product. Having received payment for his work, the young craftsman joyfully grabbed the earned coins. Walking away with 6 worn copper coins in his palm, he felt bitter disappointment from the meager proceeds. Realizing that he would have to save for a weapon for an eternity, the boy hurriedly stopped the merchant by his clothes. In a few days, he figured out the local prices and informed the merchant that he would try to offer a different product. Wiping sweat from his forehead, the boy set about implementing a new plan to earn money. Standing on stacked logs, he prepared material for his next experiment. The boy decided to try to grow special mushrooms using magic. Soon mushrooms filled with magical power appeared on the wood. Having gathered the first result, the young mage hoped that the rare product would bring significant profit. When the merchant told him about means to restore mana, the boy was stunned by their existence. The merchant showed him a magic mushroom and explained its rarity due to the difficulty of cultivation. Seeing the tiny mushroom in the man's palm, the boy was surprised by its unremarkable appearance. He brought a mushroom grown by a familiar method, but quickly realized it was an ordinary wood species, not a magical plant. Imagining the possibilities of artificial cultivation, the boy was inspired by a new idea while the merchant awkwardly watched him. For experiments, the young mage received several dried logs from an old villager. He assumed that the magic mushroom needed not only mana, but also the right balance of dryness and moisture. Settling the mycelium in the wood, the boy patiently waited and acknowledged that the experiment could easily fail. Then he enthusiastically decided to saturate each log with his own mana. The young researcher divided the logs according to the amount of power invested, tended the field by day, and continued weaving sandals at night. Every evening he returned to the experiment and filled the prepared wood with magic. After a long wait, mushrooms appeared on only 3 logs, but the happy boy received proof of the success of his method. However, the small harvest and lack of storage space immediately showed that production would have to be expanded for real profit. The boy decided to erect a separate building, turning the construction into a new test of his magic. Recalling the ridges created in the field, he knelt down and tried to give the earth the shape of a building. Since creating matter from nothing required too much power, the young mage decided to control the already existing soil and stones. Testing the stone as a projectile, he saw its destructive speed, but considered such a method wasteful. Using ready material sharply reduced mana expenditure, and the raised earth spikes confirmed his affinity with earth magic. A clear vision of the entire process helped the spell work, but the boy quickly became exhausted. Since he could only properly control the soil, the young mage finally suspected an elemental earth inclination in himself. He also realized that transforming earth into metal would be almost impossible for him. Rejecting overly complex transformations, the boy focused on creating a simple earthen shelter. Straining all his will, he directed a huge flow of mana into the earth before him. Excessive load clouded his consciousness and deprived him of his last strength. The exhausted boy fell unconscious right near the site of the failed construction. He came to his senses in bed under the worried gazes of his relatives and suffered from a severe headache for 2 more days. The young mage realized that he had experienced acute mana exhaustion when almost the entire reserve of power was drawn from his body, and with relief confirmed that his life was not in danger. While the angry family watched over him, the boy understood that internal mana usually supported and strengthened his body. Returning to the shallow depression at the experiment site, he was glad of the absence of major damage and began to look for the cause of the sudden excessive mana expenditure. The boy realized that the attempt to create an entire structure required 10 times more mana due to the difference between area and volume. Realizing his mistake, he decided to create only building materials instead of a finished building. The young mage successfully made the first bricks and temporarily gave up on directly constructing the house with magic. By laying the bricks himself, the boy completed an awkward but quite suitable shelter. The new success convinced him that the possibilities of earth magic continued to expand relentlessly. Looking over the patchwork fields of the village, the boy sadly saw how inconvenient the inherited land had become. The ancient plots were already poorly suited for cultivation, although the young mage secretly took pride in the special appearance of his native village. He planned to clear the land with a single spell and turn stones and stumps into fertilizer. The boy gathered together his skills in field cultivation, body strengthening, and brick making. To simplify the long field spellcasting, he gave the new action the short name Soil Improvement. Although only he possessed these skills for now, the boy still tried to fix it with a verbal name. The young mage noticed that during each use of power, he involuntarily repeated the same spell. He recalled how much time he spent before learning to control magic and pronounce spells. As soon as the boy named Soil Improvement, the neglected plot instantly turned into even furrows. Realizing that the spell worked immediately after the spoken name, he joyfully acknowledged the emergence of his own original magic. Although spellcasting without words exhausted the mind, the new spell quickly processed about a square with a side of 10 meters. The boy noticed that the verbal spell each time maintained the same range and created long parallel furrows. He also found out that he could mentally change the scale of cultivation, spending mana according to the chosen area. To test his guess, the young mage repeatedly created bricks many times, annoying those around with endless exclamations. After several months of training, the boy learned to separate the concept of the object from the short creation command. Eventually, all the bricks he summoned became uniform in size and weight, and the new spell was completed. The young mage realized that repeatedly combining the word with the result turned the magic into a conditioned reflex. Comparing the discovery to a dog's reaction to a familiar signal, he formulated new rules of magic for himself. Despite the wary looks of the villagers, the boy called the new technique the creation of spells and decided to name other skills. The mother saw the huge piles of bricks with which her son enthusiastically filled the space around the storage and pointed out a new problem. Guessing that from the same soil one could make dishes, the boy earned his mother's sincere admiration. He immediately created many cups, bowls, jugs, and plates from the same raw material. Seeing the mountains of monotonous brown dishes, the young master decided to move from quantity to quality and create a white cup. The mother looked at the pure white cup with a saucer with surprise and joy, having never seen such before. The boy tried to decorate the new product with flowers, but the unsuccessful drawing revealed a complete lack of artistic talent. Then he decided to create not porcelain, but a long transparent glass from sea sand. Receiving a glass familiar from a past life, the boy realized he had created an object unseen even beyond the village. Before the merchant's arrival, the family prepared sandals and a small batch of magical mushrooms for sale. Seeing the traveling merchant, the boy rejoiced at the opportunity to sell dishes and earn money to expand mushroom production. However, the merchant first asked to buy the extra bricks near the house. The boy explained that he had recently built a brick storage and immediately tried to draw the guests' attention to the new dishes. The merchant ordered to arrange with the parents the sale of the bricks, showing almost no interest in the tableware. Upon refusal, the boy surrounded the merchant with such a gloomy pressure that even the mother tried to calm him down. Unable to withstand the young seller's terrifying gaze, the merchant agreed to inspect the offered goods. Seeing the unusual dishes, the merchant was fascinated by their appearance and decided to buy the products along with the bricks. But for the entire batch, the boy again received only 5 bronze coins and was stunned to realize that his earnings had hardly increased. Deciding that he was considered a foolish child, the angry boy grabbed the merchant by his clothes and demanded explanations. The merchant assured that he had already paid several times more than usual, but the young craftsman could not understand the low price of the good items. The merchant explained that he mostly sold goods to ordinary residents of small towns and villages, who did not spend much money on dishes. Wealthy buyers worked only with long-known large merchants, so the traveler had no access to this market. The boy realized that even a wonderful, expensive product would not be bought without advertising among people able to pay for it. Since there were no usual means of spreading information in this world, he pondered how to make his pottery a fashionable topic among the nobility. The lack of necessary connections shattered the dream of quick wealth, and the frightened merchant hurried to end the gloomy conversation. At farewell, the merchant reported a high demand for bricks and promised to buy 10 times larger a batch next time. When the loaded cart left the village, the boy remained angrily watching after the failure of the plan with the expensive pottery. Preparing for the merchant's next arrival, the boy tirelessly created new bricks. Soon, entire labyrinths of tall brick stacks grew around the storage. The merchant was delighted with the fulfilled promise and brought a creature capable of transporting the entire load. Seeing a huge, scaly head behind the building, the boy froze in surprise. Before him stood a winged, dragon-like horse in harness, which he at first took for a monster. The merchant explained that it was not a real dragon, but a beast raised for work. The boy learned that working beasts were hatched from eggs that absorbed the master's mana and gave birth to a devoted helper. The appearance of the future creature depended on the person incubating the egg and the properties of their mana. Due to the unpredictability of the result, especially strange or useful working beasts were highly valued, while the porters stacked bricks on the cart. The dragon horse, resembling a legendary dragon, patiently waited for the last brick to be loaded. The merchant praised the boy for his work, and the young seller admired the strong and enduring beast. Learning about the high price of dragon horses and other reliable riding creatures, the boy immediately became interested in their value. He realized that the demand for bricks could disappear, and successfully raising a rare working beast could become a new source of great money. The merchant showed an egg, the price of which was almost equal to all the savings the boy had accumulated. Despite the huge cost, the young mage was eager to raise a working beast on his own. He gave the trader a whole pile of coins and asked to bring such eggs again in the future. While the family was harvesting, the father returned from hunting, whom the little daughter joyfully called to her. One of the villagers noticed the man's fourth child and remarked that the head of the family had been very busy lately. The homeland warmly welcomed the father, and the mother suggested celebrating the return by purchasing from a traveling merchant. When the mother asked to borrow money, the boy awkwardly realized that he had already spent all the coins. The mother's carefree smile showed that she did not yet know about the complete disappearance of the savings. Refusing the loan, the boy suddenly heard from her a proposal to try growing blue 20. He recalled how, at the age of 3, the mother first asked him to help with this crop, although an ordinary child could not work in the field. The mother's request then filled the little boy with such zeal that he immediately took up the unfamiliar work. Seeing the even furrows on the site of neglected land, the mother was impressed by the son's magical abilities. The father also caught the boy with a large harvest in his hands and heard an admiring assessment of his achievements. Noticing the son's interest in work, the mother directly asked if he wanted to earn money. At 5 years old, the boy already sought to save for the future, traded with the merchant himself, and grew magical mushrooms, increasingly surprising his mother. The mother recalled the self-built storage and unusual dishes and wondered how persistently the son surpassed his own limits. Proud of the talented child, she at the same time could not understand the source of all his amazing knowledge and skills. Having learned about the purchase, the mother was outraged that the son had spent all the money on the egg of a working beast without any advice. She warned that such a purchase was like gambling, as people were often sold eggs of ordinary animals that almost never hatched. The mother dispelled the hope for easy wealth, and the boy was stunned to realize that the merchant had kept silent about the low probability of success. He tried to justify himself with his own earnings, but the mother's grim look reminded him that the trade was allowed for the sake of saving for the future. The mother also reminded him about the sold sandals, which the whole family had worked on, and the boy finally admitted his guilt. She strictly forbade him from buying anything further without her permission. Fearing his mother's anger, the boy decided to secretly set aside part of his income, and for the egg, he wove a convenient net from twine. Carrying the egg close to his body allowed him to safely and constantly nourish the future beast with his own mana. The boy knew that joint incubation could speed up the creature's appearance, but mixing different mana made the result unpredictable. Noticing a blue magical haze around the almost empty egg, he pondered directly pouring in his own power. The young mage closed his eyes and directed the flow of mana straight inside the shell. Holding the egg with both hands, he continued to fill it with power, feeling no resistance. The egg absorbed the invested mana and wrapped itself in a darker blue glow, although the boy did not know the safe amount of energy. Placing the egg to rest in a soft nest, he hoped it would assimilate all the received power. The boy cared for the egg daily and poured mana into it, and later thought about a separate secret place for experiments. He remembered the local custom, according to which the last word belonged to the father, and the family status was inherited by the eldest son, and again began saving for good weapons. The young mage understood that weapons could help gain a name in wartime, although the very necessity of such a path disgusted him. The fate of younger sons boiled down to lifelong subordination to the older brother, or gaining complete independence. Therefore, the boy decided to create conditions for his own independent life in advance, along with preparing weapons. With the egg in a woven bag, he resolutely set off forward, unwilling to waste time on the new path. Outside the fenced village, the boy entered a dense forest, searching for a remote place for his own plans. He climbed over a high wooden fence and finally left the safe territory of the settlement behind. The boy recalled that the village founders had reclaimed the land from the forest, but constant wars forced the inhabitants only to maintain increasingly narrow fields. Understanding that the uncultivated land belonged to no one, he decided to arrange a personal hideout here. Strengthening his body with magic, the boy began breaking through thickets and clearing the area, hardly feeling any fatigue. He approached the roots of a large tree and directed even more power into his hands. Tensing his reinforced body, the young mage tore the massive roots straight from the ground. Deprived of support, the trunk fell with a crash, revealing to the boy a new method of clearing the forest. Convinced of his success, he similarly felled the remaining trees that obstructed the future construction. The boy applied land leveling to a plot 10 meters long and 4 meters wide, turning the uneven soil into a foundation. Several repeated spells created a spacious, flat platform, and the convenience of magic impressed the young builder. He wanted to erect the entire structure with a single spell, but the memory of previous exhaustion made him abandon the dangerous idea. The boy realized that creating an empty interior space would only wastefully increase the volume of magic, so he decided to form the walls separately. Using ready bricks as a sample, he prepared to lay each wall without unnecessary mana expenditure. The young mage planned the even placement of bricks and mortar so that the future structure would not collapse. As soon as he clearly imagined one wall, the bricks rose into the air and arranged themselves in the correct order. One by one, the ready walls enclosed into a simple rectangular building, bringing the completion of the hideout closer. The boy personally added the roof and door, finishing the secret forest shelter much faster than expected. In the new hideout, he examined the egg, which had almost doubled in size and darkened, signaling the imminent hatching. When his mother called him to the village, the boy tightened the bag with the egg and hurried after her. On the eve of his 6th birthday, he joyfully joined his mother, for the time of an important ceremony had come. Only a few children and adults gathered in the village church, so the modest ritual was to begin without delay. The priest raised his hand and began the baptism, during which each child was to receive an official name. The boy imagined with excitement the cleansing, light, drinking water, and fire, because after the ritual he was to master household magic. The priest explained that household spells help people leave old hideouts from monsters and expand lands suitable for living. When the naming ceremony began, the boy realized that magic available to all allowed humanity to create large flourishing settlements. During baptism, each resident received household magic, and the boy anxiously awaited the appearance of new power. The priest invited the children to approach one by one, and the publicly accessible gift became the driving force of rapid human population growth. The ritual simultaneously gave the church new believers, the feudal lord a register of names, and the inhabitants magic and an official place in the community. Sitting opposite the priest, the boy prepared to go through a system in which each side received its own benefit. The priest warned that the granted power was to be used only to improve human life, imposing a moral obligation on the child. The boy swore not to abuse magic, and the richly decorated book in the priest's hands immediately caught his attention. When the priest placed his palm on the open parchment, the young mage suspected that before him was a special list of names. The priest named the boy the third child of Ashira and Mary, confirming his origin before the community. Raising his hand, the church servant named the child Ars and wished him to live honestly before the ruler and loved ones. During the blessing, Ars felt magical power gathering in the priest's palm, and understood that the transfer of the gift had begun. The concentrated mana suddenly burst out in a powerful stream, stunning the boy with the strength of the church ritual. The priest directed the glowing energy straight to Ars, and the space between them filled with magical waves. Behind the servant, a large circle with unknown writings unfolded, revealing to the boy the hidden structure of the spell. The magic of memory preservation recorded the seen circle in his consciousness, unexpectedly providing useful material for future research. Together with the glow, new knowledge rushed straight into Ars's head, and the overwhelmed boy fell to his knees. Recovering, he created a ball of light and made sure that household magic worked the same for a novice and an experienced adult. An attempt to strengthen the ignition spell with additional mana changed nothing, limiting his hopes for developing a simple fire. Ars remembered the priest's magic circle, but for now gave up on improving household spells and was upset by the inaccessibility of other elements. Sitting among the gathered supplies, the boy returned his thoughts to the preserved magic circle, seeing in it a different result of his work. He cheered up and decided that studying ancient symbols would help better understand the magic of this world. After many sleepless reflections, the exhausted Ars admitted that he did not understand the signs he had seen at all. The boy lay on the floor and regretted that he could not even read modern writing, let alone ancient symbols. When Ars decided to learn at least to write his own name, the eggshell suddenly cracked nearby. The egg began to hatch right in front of him, and the boy froze in anticipation of an unknown working beast. The shell continued to crack and shake, and Ars stood still nearby, afraid to miss the appearance of his first working beast. The hatching dragged on, but the boy restrained the desire to help so as not to accidentally harm the creature. A large fragment finally broke off, and a fur-covered head with small horns peeked out of the egg. Breaking through the rest of the shell, the newborn beast showed Ars the face of a horse, surrounded by a mane and paired horns. The small white creature completely emerged from the egg and collapsed exhausted among the fragments. Despite trembling legs, the beast stood up on its own, surprising Ars with its endurance immediately after birth. The boy gently stroked the newborn and sincerely accepted it into his life, finally bonding with the unexpected pet. Examining the sturdy build, long fur and horns, Ars recognized in it a horse-like deer and hoped to raise a good carrier of loads. Instead of resting, the beast began crunching its own shell, causing the owner to worry about its strange diet. Ars remembered that the appearance and behavior of a working beast depended on nourishing magic, but did not know what to feed the created creature next. As soon as the shell was finished, chewing sounded again behind the boy, hinting at the pet's insatiable appetite. Ars offered it radish from the surplus of the secret garden, and the beast eagerly took to the new food. The pet instantly ate the entire pile of vegetables, but its herbivory saved the poor owner from an expensive meat diet. Satisfied, the small beast came very close and stared intently at its savior. He clumsily climbed onto Ars's legs, seeking warmth and further breaking the distance between them. Comfortably settled on the boy's knees, the ward fell asleep, and Ars did not dare to disturb him. The animal's defenseless trust moved the young mage, although he still hoped that the little one would grow big enough for work. Only 10 days passed, but the rapid change in the ward's size already made Ars wary. The beast turned into a huge white horse with sprawling horns, far exceeding all the owner's expectations. Frightened by the expenses and size, Ars initially decided to sell the animal, but immediately wanted to give it a name. The boy planned to recreate the church magic circle during the naming ceremony to pass on at least useful household spells to the working beast. The ability to independently create clean water could save the animal from a deadly disease, so Ars began selecting an appropriate name. His own lack of talent for names troubled the boy, and the ignition spell added risk to his plan. Sorting through associations between the two-horned horse and warriors, Ars got confused in words, but eventually recalled a legendary image. The white, majestic fur suggested the name Valkyrie in honor of the goddess of war, and the beast attentively accepted the new address. Valkyrie nodded several times in response, convincing Ars that she liked the name. Noticing that the animal partially understood human speech, the boy calmed his breathing and began naturally cleansing the mana. Ars gathered a dense ball of magical power between his palms and announced the beginning of his own naming ceremony. The released mana spread around in a huge cloud, and holding it in the given form proved to be extremely difficult. Aligning his breath, the young mage squeezed the flow and focused all his attention on the future circle. The glowing magical circle finally appeared before Valkyrie, but controlling the power outside the body immediately exhausted Ars. The boy reproduced every memorized detail of the church pattern until the tension created dangerous pressure in his head. Gasping in pain, he nevertheless completed the complex circle and held it before the motionless beast. Ars solemnly assigned the name Valkyrie to the animal, spending almost all his energy on the ritual. The magical circle dissolved, and the boy fell to his knees and realized how much harder the ritual was without the church's help. Not seeing an immediate result, Ars decided that he had failed and asked Valkyrie to test the magic. The beast refused to create flames near the hideout, and such caution showed the boy that Valkyrie cared about him and the home. Instead of fire, a bright sphere appeared before the animal's muzzle, confirming the successful transfer of the household spell. Bright light shone over Valkyria, and the stunned Ars finally believed in the result of his own ritual. The boy joyfully jumped around the pet and immediately asked to show the rest of the acquired magic. Valkyria consecutively created light, drinking water, and purification, proving that she inherited a full set of household spells. The real shock came when the beast lifted bricks into the air with Ars's earth magic, which the church ritual did not pass on to children. The boy assumed that Valkyria received memory preservation and all his original spells, but did not understand the reason for such a deviation. To check, Ars showed a simple cup and asked the pet to create the same object. Valkyria just sat down and touched the ground, and her incomprehension confirmed the limit of the transferred abilities. Holding the handmade cup, Ars realized that after the naming, the beast could only use the same ready-made spells as the master. Thus, the ritual transferred magic along with the fixed form, while Ars himself could change the size of the effect with the corresponding amount of mana. Valkyria, on the contrary, only leveled an unchanging area of 10 square meters, which explained the strict limitations of household spells. Realizing that the beast possessed his secret magic, the boy doubted the safety of the sale and decided to first check the value of the discovery. Ars asked the merchant about magical working beasts, but he had never heard of such, turning Valkyria into an even more dangerous mystery. Feeling that the egg had hatched, the merchant immediately wanted to see the beast, and his ignorance only confirmed the uniqueness of the magical Valkyrie. Ars agreed to show the ward, and the merchant's sudden interest immediately became much more serious. Before the meeting, the boy ordered the Valkyrie not to cast spells in front of people, hiding his main trade secret. The merchant was fascinated by the power, white fur, and majestic appearance of the animal, which made it especially attractive to wealthy clients. Learning about the refusal to sell the Valkyrie, the merchant was initially surprised, but did not lose interest in Ars's abilities. In fact, the boy wanted to study the inherited magic, although the merchant reminded him that the egg was originally bought for profit. Ars awkwardly admitted that he had grown attached to the Valkyrie and wanted to keep her close to himself. The intelligent animal listened attentively to the conversation, and its power promised the owner the necessary help in hard work. Seeing the boy's determination, the merchant offered to give him 5 new eggs of working beasts for free. According to the plan, Ars was to hatch and raise the animals, after which the merchant would have the right to sell them. The merchant assured that he would easily find buyers for the beasts raised by Ars, while the boy clarified the future exclusivity of the deal. Sensing a possible trap, Ars snatched the scroll and began to independently establish minimally safe conditions. A 1-year contract allowed the boy to determine the quantity, terms, and price of the animals, and to terminate cooperation after significant losses. Having received a stable supply of free eggs, Ars saw breeding beasts as the best chance to escape poverty. The boy prepared to fill the new eggs with his own mana, but Valkyrie intervened in his plans with displeasure. She reached for the clutch, and the frightened Ars hastily forbade her from eating the precious eggs. The sharp reaction of the ward made the boy briefly think that he had offended or broken her trust. Instead of attacking, Valkyrie carefully settled on the eggs, showing a desire to incubate them independently. When asked about raising the new offspring, she confidently nodded and touched the clutch with her muzzle. Valkyrie began gently introducing mana into the eggs, as if she understood from birth the necessity of magical nourishment for the embryos. Ars objected to her involvement because the future form of the beasts depended on the absorbed power, but the mare did not back down. It turned out that she had already nourished 3 eggs, so the boy left them to her, realizing the difficulty of repeating the mixed mana. Valkyrie immediately brightened up, and Ars entrusted her with carefully tending the clutch until hatching. Caring for the beasts reminded him of a stray dog from a past life, which his parents allowed him to keep only after a promise of full responsibility. Looking back, the boy acknowledged the fairness of the father's demand, for saving a living creature did not end with good intentions. When the hideout was filled with Valkyrie and her noisy offspring, Ars experienced firsthand the exhausting side of daily care. All 5 eggs successfully hatched, and the new beasts turned out to be slightly larger, although outwardly almost completely resembled Valkyrie. The first breeding phase ended, but the rapidly growing herd was depleting food supplies faster and faster. Realizing that the hidden beds would not be enough, Ars decided to reclaim new fields from the forest. The boy gathered all the young beasts and led them to their first big joint work. He softened the soil near the roots and felled trees, while the wards helped clear them from the future plot. The soil improvement spell laid out even long strips, quickly turning the cleared forest into a field. Seeing the magic in Valkyrie's unnamed offspring, Ars was stunned to suspect that the abilities were passed down the entire line of working beasts. To avoid getting stuck in a new mystery, the boy relied on Valkyrie's control and continued to expand the estate by a familiar measure. A huge cleared area opened before him, and the scale of the logging made Ars think about the consequences for the first time. Traces of old boundaries showed that the forest had only returned the fields abandoned after decline, so land restoration did not seem like irreversible destruction. New land stretched far from the hideout, so the boy thought about faster transport and separate pastures for large beasts. The simplest solution was to try Valkyria as a riding animal, and Ars asked for permission to sit on her back. No one in the village made saddles and stirrups for working beasts, although ordinary horse equipment could have been suitable. The villagers advised harnessing the mare to a cart, but the boy stubbornly wanted to learn to ride. Ars understood that the ability to stay in the saddle could one day save him on the battlefield, so he did not allow himself to refuse. Replacing the bridle with a rope made of radish stalks, the boy climbed onto Valkyria and felt the advantage of a future rider. Gathering his courage, he grabbed the homemade reins and began his first attempt at horseback riding. Controlling a living animal required skill, but the intelligent Valkyria moved more cautiously than an ordinary horse and made learning easier. Adjusting her pace to the inexperienced master, the mare allowed him to stay on without a saddle, even at unexpectedly high speed. After the ride, Ars barely reached the hideout because the unusual trembling turned every muscle into pure pain. Tension in the whole body reduced the jolts, but the boy still had to squeeze Valkyria with his legs as hard as he could. The absence of a saddle and protection did not break his determination, and Ars prepared to train riding every day. Exhausting lessons pushed the boy towards a new spell, which through mana-filled eyes showed a blue haze around people. Assuming that the body constantly loses mana, Ars learned to retain it inside and sharply enhanced natural recovery. Ars realized that the duration of magical strengthening was set during the creation of the spell, so he discovered another hidden property of his power. He extended the effect of recovery throughout sleep, thanks to which even after exhausting training he had to wake up refreshed. Ars quietly cast recovery before sleep, and the night rest began to restore his strength faster. In the morning, Ars felt fully restored, although his father nearby continued to sleep soundly. Having regained strength, Ars returned without hesitation to daily horseback lessons, but the merchant brought him another egg. The merchant immediately saw several adult beasts and realized that the infusion of magic sharply accelerated their maturation. He recognized the young as ready for sale, but planned to use the first beast not for ordinary trade. The merchant offered Ars to give the beast for free for his own business, which immediately made the boy wary. Hearing about the free gift, Ars got angry because he considered such generosity wasteful. The merchant explained that he would give the beast to the local nobility, and this offer opened the way to influential buyers. He admitted that the traveling merchant lacked connections to sell expensive items, so the gift was meant to be a pass to the aristocrats. Ars recalled the unsuccessful sale of luxurious dishes without a middleman, and the merchant's logic became clearer to him. The merchant emphasized that an animal suitable for horseback riding was valuable even in war, so the gift could change their status. He reached out to the animal and saw in it an opportunity to establish a strong connection with the nobility. The merchant imagined future acquaintances and profits, while Ars remained cold to his enthusiasm. Ars forbade selling animals to enemy rulers because he did not want to turn his own estate into a source of war. The merchant decided to immediately set off for the estate, so Ars and his father had to join the trip. Together with his father and the animals, Ars left the village for the first time, and a large fortified settlement opened before him. On the streets of the unfamiliar city, Ars admired the stone buildings and crowds of people. The journey lasted 3 days, and the working animals easily pulled the cart to Fontana, where the local nobility lived. Ars saw the reconstruction of the city wall, and the merchant explained that the city's expansion supported a high demand for bricks. Learning about the local brick production, Ars realized that his former product would soon stop bringing profit. For the new business, the group stood before Raymond, the steward of the Fontana estate, whose stern gaze made everyone tense. Raymond received the guests near the stable, and Ars was disappointed that he never saw the luxurious mansion. The merchant presented the riding beasts as an exceptionally high-quality gift, and Raymond began to examine them carefully. When Raymond noticed the child, the merchant called Ars a true breeder, which put the boy at the center of the negotiations. Ars confirmed that the beasts could be bred and sold, but mistakenly called the entire breed by the name Valkyrie. He explained that the real Valkyrie stayed to protect the village because he was not going to give up his partner. Raymond agreed to issue a permit for the sale, and unexpectedly, the short negotiations gave Ars the legal right to a new business. However, the steward doubted the military usefulness of the beasts, and the guests' joy immediately turned to anxiety. Raymond pointed to the large horns that hindered the rider from swinging a weapon and ordered them to be cut off. The servants grabbed the beasts by the horns and prepared a saw, ignoring their confusion. Ars rushed to intervene, but his father held him back while Raymond mercilessly allowed the animals to be maimed. Seeing the cut-off horns, Ars clenched his fists in helplessness and barely restrained his rage. At the inn, Ars sat silently next to his father, while the merchant was at a loss for words after what he had seen. The father noticed his son's dirty hands and praised him for his restraint, but Ars only looked gloomily at his palms. Ars recalled the resilient helper dogs who silently endure pain and felt guilty before the trusting animals. He realized how devoted properly raised animals could be, making human cruelty seem even heavier. With tears, Ars clenched his fists and decided that working animals deserved the same care as loyal dogs. The father calmed Ars and suggested that the unknown consequences for lifespan could be more dangerous than the loss of horns. Ars admitted that the natural age of these creatures was still unknown to them and decided to study the impact of mutilation on their health. He was surprised by his father's calmness, but understood that a simple farmer noticed important things even without education. Ars recalled how his quick mastery of the forest frightened the villagers, and the elder even tried to deprive him of his fields. To feed the animals, the family expanded the beet fields, but the grain harvest was no longer enough for the land tax. Thanks to the father's persistence, the nobility allowed official land ownership, payment of taxes in money, and the sale of working animals. The obtained permits turned the dangerous expansion of the farm into a legal enterprise, which even aristocrats recognized as beneficial. Ars realized that his father's caution had saved the family from conflict with the authorities, and he began to appreciate his practical wisdom. Turning his thoughts back to the maimed animals, Ars decided not to leave their fate unattended. He linked future breeding with the need to protect the beasts from cruel owners, and the new business ceased to be just trade. The legal permit opened the family's path to developing the farm, but the cut horns left Ars with a troubling task for further investigation. After negotiations, the father suggested inspecting the city and buying what was necessary, and Ars gladly went with him. Ars felt gratitude for his reliable father, so anxiety gradually gave way to the joy of the journey. He agreed to the walk and moved among the stone roofs, rejoicing at the rare opportunity to see a new world. Examining the city streets, Ars noticed the absence of wooden houses and associated this with the danger of magical fires. The father explained that the light was provided by household magic, so stone dwellings hardly needed windows. Ars doubted the divine origin of magic because he knew it was transmitted through a name and a magic circle. Noticing real windows, he realized that city buildings created a new market for glass. Ars decided to change the familiar spell and mass-produce glass, and his father was only surprised by his new idea. The boy already imagined selling glass windows all over the city, and another walk turned into a business opportunity. The merchant observed Ars's ambitions and once again was convinced that the child relentlessly found new goods. He recalled that Ars's radishes once saved the village from the usual hunger, so the boy had already changed the lives of many people. In the merchant's memory appeared the years of war and exhaustion, when crop failures left people dead and devastated the land. He remembered the wild bitter radishes, and then saw Ars's large crispy fruits, capable of significantly reducing mortality from hunger. Salted radishes grew quickly and kept well in winter, thanks to which gloomy settlements received a reliable food supply. When young Ars brought a huge basket of harvest, the merchant immediately saw in him an unusual and clever master. Having bought up radishes and sandals, he began to convince other farmers to grow the new variety, and the harvest spread further. The merchant questioned Ars for hours about new ideas, because the boy surprised him with knowledge every time. After a few years, Ars brought magical mushrooms, and the merchant warned him against dangerous trips to the forest. Ars confidently dismissed fear and offered safer identical bricks, which were already in great demand. Seeing the exquisite dishes created by Ars, the merchant finally suspected the boy had hidden noble origins. He imagined Ars as a descendant of impoverished aristocracy, although all his assumptions were far from the truth. After the baptism, Ars showed the raised riding beasts, and their appearance impressed the merchant more than the previous goods. In response to the question about the desire to earn money, Ars explained that he wanted weapons for war, and the merchant again misinterpreted his goal. The merchant imagined Ars as a fugitive from a noble family who intended to restore his status through military exploits. Deciding to earn the trust of the future nobleman, he wanted to monopolize the sale of beasts and stay close to the boy. The merchant suddenly promised to serve Ars everywhere, and his excessive devotion embarrassed the child. Since then, the merchant's life increasingly revolved around Ars, although the boy himself did not understand the reason for such attention. Returning home, Ars saw his mother by the road, and the family joyfully welcomed the travelers. After several days of shopping, Ars ran to his mother, and his father brought home a cart with the necessary items. On the cart lay a saw, alcohol, and various supplies, so the earned money was almost gone. Ars hugged a basket of new eggs and decided that the future sale of beasts would soon replenish the family funds. He valued Valkyrie as an extremely precious commodity and imagined himself the owner of a luxurious trading monopoly. However, the memory of the cut horns forced Ars to put aside dreams and check the consequences of mutilation for the beasts. For the experiment, he placed two animals side by side, leaving the horns on one and preparing to cut them off the other. Ars apologized to the animal and raised the saw, understanding that the comparison required a painful step. Recalling how he once trimmed deer horns for safety, he convinced himself to complete the experiment. Ars began to perceive the beasts as livestock and goods, so he was able to saw off two hard horns. After a few days, both beasts looked healthy, and the cutting did not cause any noticeable threat to life. During the check, the animals calmly ate feed, and Ars carefully compared their behavior. He found that the hornless beast retained magic, but could no longer properly apply it. Ars associated the horns with the role of human hands in sorcery, since wounded warriors without both hands also lost the ability to cast spells. He realized that the horns served as a pointer of the target, and their loss deprived the beast of the ability to direct the spell. The discovery threatened Ars's monopoly, because the offspring of the Valkyrie could pass magic to new owners. To keep the secret, Ars decided to cut off the horns of all the beasts he would sell to traveling merchants. He calmed down that the procedure was not fatal, but turned the horn trimming into a mandatory part of the trade. Ars showed his mother the brought items, and then set off to the church with an important document from Fontana. The priest reviewed the paper and clarified that it concerned not only the permission to sell working beasts. Ars explained that he had learned to read in church on rainy days, so now he could follow the content of the deals himself. The document officially transferred to him the cleared northern land and allowed paying tax with money, which significantly strengthened the household. The priest asked about the boundaries of the allotment, and it turned out that the paper contained neither the exact location nor the size of the land. The priest explained that the document did not limit either the location of the allotment or its use, so the monetary tax allowed Ars to engage in any business. He said that the aristocrats of Fontana ruled a large territory through local families, but did not directly control every piece of it. The ruling families paid Fontana money for their privileges and had to provide warriors in case of danger. Ars was surprised why he was acquainted with such families, and the priest suggested that the boy's land was meant to tie him to Fontana's holdings. Realizing the value of working beasts, Ars decided that Fontana did not want to allow his transfer under the power of another aristocrat. The nobles underestimated the child and did not foresee that he could clear an allotment the size of the land of a real ruling family. Taking advantage of others' underestimation, Ars decided to expand his possessions as much as his strength would allow. He saddled the Valkyrie and with new determination began to master the surrounding lands. The Valkyrie loosened the soil and felled trees, while the hornless beasts dragged logs, but the expansion itself did not yet bring profit. Ars gathered the harvest, bricks, magical mushrooms, and working beasts, and realized that all sources of income were limited by a shortage of labor. Unable to perform all simple tasks simultaneously, he decided to hire an assistant. During the family dinner, Ars spoke about the side job, and the elder brother Bite immediately volunteered to work. The mother agreed only on the condition that both sons would help at home during the harvest, so Ars cautiously accepted her demand. Suspecting his brother of laziness, Ars inquired about his true purpose, but Bite began to evade the answer. Bite finally demanded his own Valkyrie, as he dreamed of repeating the feats of heroes who saved princesses on horseback. Ars recalled how his brother had already tried to secretly saddle a beast and finally understood the strength of his passion. Despite doubts, Ars hired Bite and got his first worker. Barely starting work, Bite mocked Ars's storage, and the harsh criticism struck the pride of the young master. Looking at the square structure with thick walls, Ars himself saw in it a gloomy likeness of a prison. To correct the unsuccessful appearance, he decided to test his architectural abilities on a model of a city inn. Ars recalled the appearance of the inn and the arrangement of its rooms, preparing an accurate plan of the new building. He passed Mana through the brick walls of the inn and encompassed the entire structure with it to study the hidden construction. Holding the form of the building with Mana, Ars applied memory retention and engraved every part of it. In the boy's consciousness, a complete volumetric image of the inn arose, turning the memory into a ready drawing. Ars realized that he had previously wasted mana filling the entire volume, although for the building it was enough to reproduce only its frame and surfaces. Relying on the memorized form of mana, he decided to create the building with one spell and prepared for a new experiment. Ars directed mana into the ground and began transforming the soil into bricks for the future walls. He held the necessary magical contour in memory, and the form of a large inn began to emerge above the ground. The boy replaced the magical frame with bricks and mortar, bringing the complex reproduction of the structure to completion. Exhausted, Ars saw the finished building before him and realized that his experiment had finally succeeded. The reconstructed entrance stood at full height, and Ars joyfully acknowledged the first great success of his construction magic. He added side walls for strength and allocated extensions for a harvest storage and a stable for the Valkyries. Having examined the familiar architecture, Ars was reassured that the professional plan made the new dwelling significantly safer than the old shack. The young builder decided to add wooden doors and furniture separately, as the stone replica already provided a reliable foundation. The ability to erect such a sturdy structure with a single spell convinced Ars of his own growth, and he planned to move his base here. At home, his father called Ars for a talk, interrupting his satisfied thoughts about the new building. The father mentioned the lumberjacks, and Ars immediately became wary due to a possible conflict over tree cutting. The next morning, the lumberjack Maddock met Ars near the workyard and inquired about the reason for his early visit. Ars explained that he had heard about the lumberjack's anger over unauthorized logging, and Maddock's acquaintance with his affairs gave hope for advice. To avoid unnecessary hostility, the boy brought Maddock strong alcohol and persuaded him to an open conversation. Ars suggested limiting the number of trees or cutting further away from the lumberjacks' plots, but Maddock stated that the boy did not understand the essence of the offense. When Ars mentioned the possibility of walking on the log deeper into the forest, Maddock acknowledged the idea as practical but insufficient. Ars assumed that his magic and working beasts threatened the lumberjacks' earnings, but Maddock rejected this explanation. Maddock explained that light magical harvesting devalued hard manual labor and made the lumberjacks fear for their professional dignity. He reproached Ars for neglecting the pride of the craftsman, and the boy confusedly denied any intention to humiliate them. Maddock said that lumberjacks were born and died in their craft, so they considered trees both a means of life and a treasure. Ars heard that the trees he felled unnecessarily could rot and become unusable, so for the first time he saw the consequence of his own haste. Maddock warned that such behavior inevitably portrayed Ars as a person who despised the pride and way of life of the lumberjacks. Learning that aristocrats also ordered logs for land development, Ars realized that the craftsmen expected proper use of every tree. Maddock explained that no one opposed Ars only because of his status, but now the boy had to realize responsibility for his own actions. Ars understood that his father had heard about the dissatisfaction from Madoc himself and tried to warn his son before the problem escalated into a major conflict. Absorbed in the settlement's development, Ash barely noticed the people living nearby. Only a conversation with Mr. Madoc made him break away from his own thoughts. Madoc offered the boy help with work, although others were already used to his constant focus. In response, Ash took up creating a forest management plan. But the boundless Valkyrie forest remained a dangerous mystery, as no one knew its true boundaries. The shortage of firewood and the need for new fields showed that logging threatened the entire environment. Therefore, Ash proposed combining forestry with forest protection in a single plan. Madoc and the lumberjacks joined the effort. They were to grow trees and magical mushrooms instead of mindless logging. Despite the workers' doubts, the idea promised to give the forest new life and a stable income to the people. Ash decided to bring his idea to the community for discussion. After the conversation, the village reached a common decision. Madoc agreed to oversee the forest affairs. At the same time, Ash became worried whether people would truly accept the new order. Seeing the logs for magical mushrooms, Madoc handed over actual forest management to the boy. He himself took up making doors, cabinets, and other items from wood, returning to the craft of a carpenter. Ash was already transplanting radish seeds when he saw how many people had gathered to work in the field. The work of Beto, who was learning to control the working beasts, demanded special skill from everyone. Although it was difficult for him, Beto helped in the field, and his efforts gave the child hope for a life without war. Thanks to the distributed labor, Ash was able to focus on developing magical mushrooms. The changes accelerated the work so much that he felt several years older. But that joy was cut short when only trampled beds remained in the field. People found large tracks and realized that the crops were destroyed by wild boars. The herd frightened even those residents who had not previously refused hard work. Ash admitted that his rapid development disrupted the balance. Former traps and warning boards did not hold back the animals. Feeling guilty, he learned that the boars had already begun to appear right on the roads. The disturbed food chain displaced the beasts from the forest and scattered them across the surrounding lands. Having tasted the harvest, the huge boars returned to the field, so Ash decided to stop their raid himself. However, the shield could not pierce their hide, and the size of the animals only increased the threat. While others hid in the wagon and watched, Ash listened to the calls to find a way to overcome the boars. Instead of waiting for someone else's decision, he dared to deal with the monsters himself. Mounting Valkyrie, Ash set off towards the herd without a ready plan. In front of the giant boar, he gathered his courage and ordered the horse to act as agreed. Valkyrie rushed forward, but one collision with the monster could have been their last. The horse seemed to wait until the rider calmed down and fully trusted him. Hearing her name, Valkyrie suddenly moved. The wind hit her face as she broke into a swift gallop. In a moment, Valkyrie was already carrying Ash right past the enraged boars. Her quick surge gave the boy a chance to attack without getting caught by the tusks. But at such speed, even aiming at the target turned out to be almost impossible. Ash released a scatter of stone shots towards the herd. One of the shells did hit the boar, but it did not stop it. Not yet possessing a full-fledged spell, Ash tried to simultaneously create several stones. The boar roared and rushed in pursuit, because the boy's magic weakened without contact with the earth. The Valkyrie dashed between the trees, saving the rider from the pursuer. Her endurance and speed turned out to be much greater than Ash could imagine. When the monster did not fall behind, he only concentrated more firmly on the new attempt. Danger was catching up with them, but Ash called the Valkyrie at the last moment. At his signal, she was to jump while he supported her with a physical enchantment. The Valkyrie flew over the field, precisely understanding the intention of her rider. Her wings spread in the air, turning the escape into a real flight. Together with the Valkyrie, Ash rose above the herd, leaving the boars and anxiety for the field below. The Valkyrie lifted Ash into the air, and the escape from the boars finally became safe. Seeing the land far below, the boy realized that their plan had really worked. Her physical enhancement had already reached its limit, so Ash could not make the Valkyrie any faster or stronger. With a growl behind them, they landed on a high ledge, unreachable for the pursuer. It was this very gorge that was the trap Ash had prepared for the boar. From the height, he saw how the monster was below with no chance to reach them. Exhausted, Ash decided to return with the Valkyrie, leaving the enemy without prey. An unsuccessful rockslide reminded him that even a mighty attack could not pierce the thick hide of the boar. To win, he had to combine earth magic with the speed and legs of the Valkyrie. Thus ended Ash's first great battle. In the village of Beidou, they enthusiastically greeted the brother, and Madoc was surprised that he had defeated the giant boar alone. However, Ash warned that even more dangerous animals might remain in the forest. Since then, people increasingly relied on him for protection against large boars. But Ash did not forget how risky this victory was, one at the cost of his own safety. The training began with a scatter of stone shots. He realized that against giant monsters, you cannot let the target get too close. After 2 victories, Ash learned to shoot several projectiles from the Valkyrie, almost 30 meters. Instead of hunting every beast, he decided to protect the field itself, preparing a pit for external threats. The new plan boiled down to surrounding the crops with defensive walls. Ash allocated additional lands for future fields, but did not want the workers to rely solely on the wall. The test showed that the defense had to withstand a boar's strike for at least an hour, until people reached a safe place. Unable to immediately create a continuous 5-meter wall, he connected short sections and filled them with sand. The large project convinced Ash that every great spell he created increased his magical reserve. Before them rose such a long wall that its edge disappeared from sight. To reproduce a complex spell, Ash had to precisely repeat the image, conditions, and strength of the magic. Months went into creating the brick spell, because the hardest part was reproducing the same magic again. Constant repetition made the necessary spells simpler and even helped speed up the scattering of stones. Now the wall spell worked much faster than during the first attempts. An unexpected advantage of the Valkyrie was added to the work. Her horns allowed the use of spells that Ash had mastered only after giving her a name. 5 horned Valkyries helped build the walls, and a new group was already maturing nearby from eggs. Ash also thought about mana restoration, leaving magical mushrooms as a reliable source of power. Eventually, a 4-sided wall arose around the field. Beidou got carried away with defense, but reminded that without an entrance, people would not be able to use the field. Realizing the mistake, Ash decided to lay a real road. He arranged 2 passages, one towards the village and the other towards the forest. Recalling ancient roads that could last for centuries, Ash took them as a model. For the paved road, he first made a base of stone and gravel, and on top secured a flat layer. The new Roman road was reliable, although for now it stretched only in a straight line to one point. The news about another brother made Tun interrupt his thoughts about the road. Carl, the youngest of those recently named, visited Ash and brought news after helping with the houses. He noted that glass windows did not become a popular product, so Ash pondered a new business. Looking at the town, Ash realized, in the world of exchange, people need a thing they truly want to pay for. The thought led him to furniture, since the local lumberjacks were skilled at working with wood. Carl immediately became interested in the beautiful furniture he saw in the workshop. It turned out that the lumberjacks mostly sold firewood, not heavy products that were difficult to transport. Ash decided to talk to them about furniture and look for buyers in the city, where such work could have value. The idea seemed successful to Carl, although people would also have to ensure the product was accessible not only to the rich. Seeking not to depend only on magic, Ash decided to create a furniture company and give the town its own profit. Carl promised to join the cause in the future, and Ash reminded him that he is still a child. Carl asked Ash to teach him magic because he did not want to be left out of his older brother's abilities. This request reminded Ash how Beidou once was also interested in magic, but his mother reacted to it with anxiety. Testing the physical enchantment on himself, Ash was surprised how Beidou could easily carry the weight of his own body. It turned out that Beidou was already training body enhancement, although he had no talent for earth magic. He learned to precisely strengthen himself for a short time and gladly helped with heavy work. But the gained strength dragged Beidou into fights with other village children. Even older boys could not handle him alone, although Beidou never sought a fight first. Then the bullies gathered in a group, and bruises began to appear on him. Despite defeats, Beidou got up each time and continued to resist. Eventually, no one in the village wanted to fight him, but his mother could not endure the constant anxiety. Ash decided that he could not irresponsibly teach magic to everyone who asked for it. Carl assured him that he sought to develop the mind, not the muscle strength of Beidou. Concentration of mana could improve memory, calculation, and other thinking abilities. Ash agreed to teach Carl magic that would help him become more clever. Carl dreamed of reading and counting so well as to become the village's needed steward. Therefore, Ash decided to direct his magical exercises toward developing the mind, not the body. The new boots became a quiet sign of how the boys' lives had changed. Soon Gran came to the settlement a master, interested in the giant boar that Ash had defeated. Seeing the unsuccessful fire in the oven, he immediately pointed out that the temperature was too low. Gran suggested making a bigger oven to finally achieve the necessary heat. For this, he needed bellows capable of blowing the fire stronger. The intense work exhausted Ash, and he fell ill with a fever. It was then that Beto returned to the village together with an unusual traveler. A few days later, the stranger was already treating Ash, not letting the illness disrupt the work. Gran introduced himself as a merchant specializing in creating and selling items, and he came to check the rumors about the giant boar. His rough manner of speaking immediately revealed his origin from a distant native land. The guest explained that he came from an island far to the east. When he was shown the whole boar carcass, Gran became even more interested. He admitted that he wanted to meet the person who managed to tame such a dangerous creature. Learning that the victory was achieved with a trap and together with a partner, Gran did not hide his surprise before the young Ash. Ash heard from him about 3 fierce boars that attacked the village near the northern forest. The worst part was that the giant boars could cast spells on themselves. Gran explained their skin gained such strength thanks to the magical properties of the body, so arrows could not penetrate it. From a piece of boar tusk, one could create a weapon harder than metal. Realizing the value of the prize, Ash took out the tusks he had kept for future research. Carl immediately became eager to have his own weapon. Gran carefully examined the tusks of the giant boar. He explained that the beast killed during magic left materials of much higher quality. Traces of mana in the tusks made them significantly better conductors than ordinary weapons. At the same time, special conditions and a catalyst were needed to transform magical material into a truly strong weapon. Ash did not understand what exactly could serve as such a catalyst. Gran named 2 necessary things: a furnace with controlled temperature and the mana core of the magical beast. Such a core was part of the body that allowed magical creatures to cast spells, but it differed in each species. Ash was confused upon hearing that replacing the core with a simple pile of materials was impossible. Gran looked closely at the horns of the working beasts, as if at a rare treasure. The horns turned out to be a possible mana core for those creatures that used magic. But working beasts capable of casting spells were considered extremely valuable, so Ash had to rethink his attitude towards them. Even knowing that stronger weapons required different materials, he admitted a furnace was indispensable. Gran promised to try to create the necessary furnace, and Ash decided to help him. The new bricks were supposed to withstand fire better than ordinary clay, giving a chance to build the furnace without damage. Gran explained that for controlled heat, the furnace needed bellows to intensify the airflow. Ash could only work with soil, so he did not know how to create the wooden parts of such a mechanism. Instead, Gran became enthusiastic about the idea and suggested assembling the bellows together. Near the furnace appeared bellows with a pedal, capable of pumping air with rhythmic movements. The new mechanism transformed the workshop into a place where the furnace could truly operate. But Gran immediately added another requirement: charcoal had to be produced for the furnace. Ash built a sealed charcoal furnace, in which wood was supposed to turn into quality fuel, not ash. Gran drew the future factory of things and explained that charcoal required a space that would not let air escape. The most important step was the first one to light the new furnace. Having spent his last strength, Ash barely kept up with Gran's frantic pace. The master was already rushing to the next task, not giving the boy a chance to rest. Exhausted, Ash stopped, and Carl anxiously asked what had happened to him. Carl decided to find out why the eccentric Gran was in such a hurry with the work. Ash explained to him that high-quality coal from strong wood was needed not only for the workshop, but also for the future settlement. Reaching the boundary, he handed over part of the work to Carl instead of himself. Gran admitted that the task was completed thanks to Carl's help. By the bellows, Carl diligently carried out the assignment, although he was not used to such labor. Ash only looked at his brother guiltily, who had exhausted himself in his place. Meanwhile, Gran showed a knife made in several attempts and emphasized that the main thing was its quality. The new blade shone like a white pearl. A faint magical glow flickered in its steel. The knife turned out to be lighter than the metal sword and could absorb mana when needed. Even without mana, it remained sturdy and suitable for battle. Ash thought that he would like to carry such a weapon with him. Gran called the item a sword made from the tusk of a young boar. A weapon from a magical beast could grow along with its owner, feeding on his mana. So far it only resembled a dagger, but it was supposed to develop further. If passed down to heirs, it could become a precious family relic and grow stronger with each owner. Ash thanked Gran because he felt in the sword the refinement he lacked. Gran admitted that he gained knowledge in a true school of masters, not just wandering in search of techniques. Reminding that magical weapons are usually named by their creator, he asked Ash to decide the fate of the sword. Ash named Gran's first weapon Kugeiken Gyuren. Having received his first magical blade, he also remembered the magical mushrooms that Carl had offered. Countless mushrooms on the logs turned out to be a necessary catalyst for future products. Gran called this place a craftsman's dream because mushrooms could be gathered almost continuously. Ash explained that in a few years, he managed to cultivate so many that the supply was constantly replenished. Gran immediately saw in the mushrooms the basis for mana restoration potions. It was easier for Ash to simply eat a dried mushroom to regain his strength. But the master suggested making a real potion from them, although this was not Ash's specialty. He decided first to turn the catalyst into a mana potion. Exhausted Carl wanted to monitor the process, but Gran advised him to rest. The boy fell asleep in the warmth, finally allowing himself a break. Ash promised that thanks to Carl's memory, he would be able to learn even just by observing the work. The first mana potion recipe began with a simple decoction. Dried mushrooms were ground into powder, poured with boiling water, and a drink similar to shiitake tea was obtained. Gran was already thinking about protective armor, and Ash was saving coal powder for new mixtures. From the fur of a giant boar, he decided to make leather armor, soaking the material with mana potion. Such protection had to yield to weapons made of tusks, but still surpassed ordinary leather. Having restored his strength through meditation after a short sleep, Ash surprised Gran with his endurance. At dawn, the leather armor was ready, and Ash received a full set made from boar fur. Beto's clothes had to be remade again, because he grew so fast that the previous size no longer fit. Gran asked Ash to come up with a new thing, and the master did not hide that the work fascinated him. Ash proposed to build an entire building from bricks and teach workers to create the necessary parts. Such an idea immediately ignited Gran's creative curiosity. Ash realized that he could reproduce only a limited number of bricks if he had already created a large structure from them. Therefore, the new house had to be compact, use space wisely, and not waste bricks. Gran called it an interesting challenge, since the shape of the building had to be thought out in advance. He undertook to create his own project, and Ash agreed to check if he could realize it with magic. At the same time, the boy began to think about what other properties materials from the boar and Valkyrie could provide. Before him lay the tusk of a giant boar, the horns of the Valkyrie, heat-resistant brick, and mana potion powder. To change the heat-resistant brick, Ash had to break it down into clay again and repeat the heating in reverse order. Relying on knowledge from his past life, he began his own experiment. He added boiled mana potion, crushed horns, and tusks to the mixture. After many failures, Ash began preparing samples with different proportions of materials and firing them in the furnace. Eventually, an exceptionally strong brick formed in his hands. The new material was not reddish-brown like ordinary brick, but had a light marble shade. Ash realized that his magic created only things related to the earth, but hands-on experiments expanded the boundaries of the possible. This gave him the idea to make the brick as strong as metal. Although he was not yet accustomed to experiments, the goal already seemed achievable. Preserving the image of the new material in memory, Ash prepared to reproduce it with magic. Thus appeared a new spell, the creation of reinforced brick. Since then he could make such bricks without horns and fangs. It was enough just to apply the spell. However, the result turned out to be not what he had hoped for. Instead of the familiar cobblestone, a floor resembling marble appeared before him. Then Ash returned to the Roman road spell to lay the path more evenly and without potholes. He planned a 6-meter road with separate lanes for carts and safe edges for pedestrians. Gran completed the project of a large building made of reinforced brick. Before Ash stood a spacious house with an arched passage and glass windows, quite unlike the usual village huts. Seeing the structure, Ash felt that Gran was not just a craftsman, but a true architect. The arch in the house distributed pressure to the sides, saved materials, and made the structure stronger. Gran found the best use for stone materials, and the new house became more spacious and brighter than the old inn courtyard. Thanking for the help, he asked for permission to build his own house here as a reward for the work. The traveler wanted to have a place where he could stay without expenses when he came to Ash. Ash also had to consider the wishes of Valkyrie, so that other relatives of hers would settle behind the walls. He accepted Gran's request because he finally found in him a creator he could trust. Gran became the first outsider resident of Ash's territory and joined the family dinner. At the same time, it turned out that according to local customs, the house and land were to be inherited by the elder brother Hector. Young people here married early, and family homes were constantly expanded to accommodate everyone. Although Ash loved his family, he had long dreamed of living near them but in his own house. He decided to leave the parental home and began preparing for independent life. The first step was moving the dwelling from the southern edge closer to the center of the lands. Ash recreated Gran's house, spending as much mana as he once did on the inn. He replaced ordinary bricks in the new dwelling with reinforced ones, and the house took on the appearance of a marble estate. Around the future settlement, 4 kilometers of walls arose, and roads connected them to the outer walls. Gran's house he placed on the southern land, near the road to the village. Beto received several houses for the residents of the inn yard, and decided to rent out extra rooms to those who would work in the field. The lumberjacks settled in the northeast near the forestry, where they were also supposed to produce charcoal. The northwest part of Ash he left almost forested, postponing its development for the future. In the center were located Ash's house, the Valkyrie's dwelling, and plots for magical mushrooms. When all preparations for the move were completed, 9-year-old Ash already considered the new house his home, although Beto reproached him for the land given to the traveler. Gran inquired why the traveling merchant needed his own land at all. He admitted that he dreamed of opening a shop and trading independently in this territory. He knew that the magical abilities of the Valkyries could turn them into an expensive commodity, not just working beasts. Despite rumors about the danger of these lands, Ash allowed the merchant to open a shop here. Gran supported this idea because he was tired of life on the road and wanted to have a place for trade. But before fully trusting, he decided to inform Ash of something important. It turned out that other people already considered Ash dangerous. The boy tried not to think about it, but Gran's words made him evaluate himself more soberly. Moreover, the local nobles began to complain about the huge walls that had grown around the settlement. Gran warned officials would soon demand answers and taxes. Ash reminded that he had permission to develop this land, but no one wanted to hear his objections. A representative of Fontana declared the territory the property of his house and threatened to take it by force. According to customs, peasants paid taxes with grain, waiting for the collector in their own houses, but now the rules had changed. Fontana's order provided for the confiscation of Ash's land, belongings, and even valuable working animals. Recalling a life where money gave freedom, Ash refused to become livestock that existed only for offspring. A rumble near the house interrupted his thoughts. Carl found himself in danger near the stable. Valkyrie rushed to him, trying to shield the child from the attacker. The soldier disdainfully called Carl merely a working beast who dared to stand against him. He raised his sword against Ash, considering any resistance insolence. The steel blade sliced through the air above the boy. The attacker did not intend to heed the fact that a child stood before him. Everyone screamed when they saw that Carl was no longer moving. Stunned, Ash heard Beto running up to him. Valkyrie saved Carl, but the boy fainted, losing blood from a cut on his forehead. When Carl was laid in bed, the adults checked Ash's condition as well. But he was already looking at the wounded soldier, unable to look away from the violence. In fear, Ash released a scatter of stones, and the blow passed through the attacker. The soldier fell, and the boy froze, realizing the consequence of his own magic. Blood on the hands became a boundary for him, after which everything changed. Beto tried to convince Ash that he had not a single scratch, but it did not lessen the shock. Ash admitted that he killed the soldier instantly, firing a stone shot in panic. Gran warned, if the survivor reports this to Fontana, a whole army might come here. Escape did not seem like a way out, because under Fontana's rule, they would face only the fate of property and slaves. People argued whether they could resist the nobleman, but realized that without a fight, they would lose everything. One of the adults asked Ash why he worked so hard when he was still a child. Beto reminded that next time the soldiers might take all their loved ones or kill them. Not wanting to allow this, he declared that he would fight together with his brother. Beto's determination made Ash raise his gaze. The older brother took on the duty to protect the younger ones. He reminded that it was their labor that provided people with food, coal, and things, and Valkyrie could give them the strength to endure. Maddock also refused to return to his old life and supported the decision to defend. The lumberjacks promised to stand by, recognizing Ash as their leader. Even the father understood that he could no longer calmly watch others risk themselves for his family. He decided to stand with his sons and defend the home together with them. Gran agreed to gather information through other merchants to prepare for the strike. His readiness surprised Ash, who believed that merchants only thought about profit. But Gran did not want to give up the market of working beasts without a fight and had his own reasons to support the settlement. He believed in Ash and promised to help find new allies. Everyone around was ready to fight for freedom, families, and the right to live on this land. Ash finally decided to fight the nobles for the freedom of his land. He offered a reward to those who would join the resistance and risk their lives with him. Ash called magic his main gift and promised to give it to new allies. For this, he suggested that everyone choose a common surname Bara. If they opposed the fountain, they had to become a separate force to be reckoned with. People could not believe that the boy was capable of conducting the naming ceremony, accessible only to priests. The first to receive the new name was Asher Bara. After him, Maddock and Beto took the surname Bara. Gran also joined the new family. All present became part of the community that Ash was to lead further. He recalled how 3-year-old Beto was already working in the field, while Ash himself was still very small. Thanks to the large harvest, taxes were reduced, and most of the fruits remained with the people. Beto grew radishes, which became his first real success. Although he was only 2 years older, Beto could already easily lift things that were impossible for Ash. He trained to strengthen his body in the field and quietly developed along with his own mana. Ash explained that his brother held mana inside his body to increase strength. Due to constant fights, Beto seemed dangerous to others, although he mostly cared about himself and his relatives. He defended himself daily from those who tried to harm his younger brother. Ash was pained to see how their mother worried after each such clash. Beto continued practicing with mana, forcing his body to move stronger and faster. Having grown stronger, he stopped losing even to older opponents. The fame of Ash's strength and skill in taming beasts spread through the village even before the new alliance. Beto decided to become strong enough to kill a giant boar and defeat a knight. He trained daily with a wooden sword and learned to ride Valkyries. All his efforts were aimed at one thing, protecting his younger brother. Ash was almost exhausted when he tried to support his brother with magic during exercises. But friends realized how much strength he truly concealed. Beto felt that the attempt had finally succeeded. His body became even stronger thanks to the new training method. Meanwhile, Ash realized that the nobles planned to take away both the land and everything created by him and Carl. The community decided to defend their own rights and not allow tyranny to destroy their home. Ash promised to endow with magic everyone who sincerely stood alongside in defending the settlement. Maddock took on the task of talking to the lumberjacks and gathering support among the workers. Tryon agreed to check the strength and movements of the enemy troops. Before parting, Ash asked his allies to take care of themselves. In response, they wished him survival, although now his path went far beyond the life of a simple farmer. The defense plan required at least 78 people, and the backup option left almost no choice. Most of the village men turned out to be ready to help, because without work in the field, their families would not survive. The decisive factor was also the position of Ash's mother, who was not going to leave him alone. Elder brother Hector returned home with his wife and checked if everyone was safe. His marriage to the daughter of the elder helped unite two families in the face of the threat. The elder himself took on part of the responsibility for the resistance and the fate of the peasants. Ash still doubted whether he had the right to involve his loved ones in danger, but they did not turn away from him. In one night, the settlement of Baruka transformed into a community where almost no one remained indifferent. Thanks to magic, even rural labor became easier, and people began to learn how to use new opportunities. Hector brought mana restoration potions and items needed to prepare each inhabitant. Beto remembered his mother, who wanted to give him new clothes for his birthday. But now the brothers agreed to train and prepare a joint strike against the enemy. Ash understood that a 4-kilometer wall would not protect 100 people without new defensive plans. The field could already withstand boars, but against human invasion, another defense had to be found. Beto joyfully called everyone to set out, because preparations for resistance had already begun. Ash explained that their path did not lead to the city, but to the nearest village in the southwest. There they wanted to talk to the villagers, who suffered from the same nobles. High taxes every winter left people without food and doomed many to hunger. A crowd gathered to listen, but at first did not trust the unfamiliar defenders. Seeing the weapons, the people asked if an ordinary village could really provide them protection. Ash reminded that Baruka had already stood against injustice and was not going to stay aside. Among the villagers came Vargas, a warrior with a sword too large for a simple farmer. He was a famous fighter who earned a name on various battlefields. At the same time, Ash heard that Vargas had left the village but now returned. Vargas declared that he would no longer submit to Fontain's tyranny and called on the people to stand beside him. His armor made of boar leather and sword showed that Baruka could arm even farmers. Beto felt competition because he did not want to yield to the new warrior. Vargas declared that the time had come to speak as equals. Ash was surprised to hear that Vargas was called the winner of the giant boar. Beto immediately called him forward, reminding that it was Ash who defeated the monster. Vargas only smiled and advised the brothers to take the rest of the people aside. He accused Ash of wanting to destroy Fontana alone. Annoyed, Ash agreed to a duel, although he was not yet used to fighting people. The villagers realized that the quarrel would not end with words alone. Ash released a scatter of stones, forcing everyone to lower their weapons. He insisted that he came not to fight them, but to talk peacefully. Vargas immediately recognized magic in the shot. Despite this, he rushed into attack, ordering Ash to try to stop him. The scatter of stones flew towards the swordsman. Vargas dodged every projectile, moving without a single unnecessary gesture. His calm showed experience, strength of character, and the ability to read the trajectory of magic. Before the warrior's charge, Ash fired a new series of shots, trying not to hit people. But Vargas deflected the stones, as if he knew exactly where they would fall. Ash changed the direction of the attack, hoping to catch him where he had to dodge. It seemed that this time the shot finally hit the target. But Vargas closed the distance and broke through to Ash through the fire. His defense strengthened in battle, and Ash recognized in this another form of physical enchantment. When a giant boar tried to intervene, Vargas restrained it with a single move. Ash realized that his opponent deliberately did not inflict lethal damage on him. Suddenly, a stone barrier rose before Vargas, stopping the advance. He saw in this a sign of Ash's power, not just a simple magical trick. Acknowledging the result of the duel, Vargas lowered his weapon and agreed to surrender. Ash did not finish him off, although he still could not forget his own fear before the fight. He explained that he only aimed where Vargas could dodge, and therefore did not want to kill him. Vargas was surprised that another sorcerer could fight so cautiously. Even lying on the ground, he used his sword as a shield to take the final blow. Ash admitted that Baruka needed such an experienced warrior. Vargas offered to surrender if none of the villagers were harmed. The crowd was already calling Baruka the victors, but Ash did not consider that his goal. He explained that he only wanted to stand together against the noble tyranny. Vargas promised to fight alongside Ash, acknowledging that the former hostility arose from a misunderstanding. In response, Fontana decided to send its own army against the village of Baruka. Their ruler swore to punish those who challenged his house. Vargas first tried the spell of brick creation, proving that Ash's magic could change others as well. After the victory over Vargas, Ash endowed the inhabitants of Linda with magic, and each of them was able to use spells. The peasants realized that Ash demonstrated the power of the new leader and turned scattered people into allies. People asked themselves if they could resist the nobility with such a powerful leader. Ash noticed that after the duel with Vargas, no one was going to flee from danger anymore. The general emphasized that Vargas's comrades were joining the inhabitants of Linda, ready to defend the village. Vargas acknowledged the correctness of his choice and praised the courage of those who came to support the village. Ash explained that people followed him because they wanted to protect friends and preserve freedom. The new squad set up camp by the river south of Linda. Ash studied the area and realized that Fontana's army would have to pass through a narrow section between the river and the village of Baruka. He ordered to quickly build housing for the army, using the magic of soil creation. In one day, large houses capable of sheltering over 100 people appeared in the settlement. Ash instructed everyone to jointly build defensive walls using the magic of wall creation. He explained that the spells were passed on to those he named, along with knowledge about their use. When people received the magic of wall creation, a problem arose with new spells that they could not yet apply. Vargas realized that this resembled learning magic of a broad spectrum. Ash noted that more powerful spells consumed more mana and were not transmitted simply by his command. Vargas showed Ash a device that could help fighters increase their mana reserve capacity. Ash examined the leather armor created by Vargas for protection during battle. Vargas explained that he made it hastily after a dangerous duel, but the item still proved useful. Ash decided that protective equipment would become important in the upcoming battle. He distributed roles among his closest comrades and mentors so that they could pass skills to other villagers. Ash had already gathered reliable forces and began thinking about the equipment they lacked. Scouts reported that more than 500 Fontana warriors were moving toward the village. Ash was stunned to calculate that the enemy had gathered the surrounding villages and outnumbered his forces by about 10 times. Despite this, he decided to fight in the open field rather than hide in the castle. The allies recognized that the peasants of Fontana were tired and without reinforcements, so they did not have a large reserve of strength. Ash emphasized that their squad possessed battle magic and could strike first. He chose an ambush because without it, the small army would have no chance of victory. Ash recalled the name Valkyrie, which had previously seemed to him just a beautiful gaming word. Valkyrie encouraged him, and nearby Vargas and Beto tried to support the young leader. Ash relied on Valkyrie and counted on her help in achieving the common goal. Valkyrie was set to fight for freedom together with Ash and his people. The inhabitants of Baruka lined up in the field, preparing for the arrival of the enemy army. Ash estimated that the enemy had about 30 men in expensive armor who gave orders to the rest of the troops. Before the enemy formation arrived a rider on a horned Valkyrie. The people of Fontana declared Ash a criminal who allegedly violated the will of the nobility. Ash understood that the orders had to reach every fighter, so he himself had to speak in a way that everyone would hear him. The peasants did not immediately believe that Ash wanted to address the enemy army directly. He used voice magic and offered the opponents to lay down their arms and join the side of freedom. Vargas warned that during the speech Ash would have to maintain silence and concentration. Ash amplified his voice with mana so that his words would spread across the entire battlefield. He revealed to the people that Fontana had appropriated the land of Baruka and planned to take all the peasants' property. Ash reminded that the inhabitants of Baruka did not deserve punishment and should not die because of the greed of the nobility. He called on his people to attack when the enemy formation wavered from what they heard. Ash swore not to allow the nobility to dispose of the peasants' lives like cattle anymore. The warriors of Baruka moved forward, and the soldiers of Fontana were confused in the middle of the speech. Ash tried to hold back the advance, noticing that part of his fighters rushed into pursuit without orders. He turned around and saw the danger that disrupted the planned ambush. One of the enemy soldiers rushed at him, trying to interrupt the address. Between Ash and the attacker, the Valkyrie instantly appeared, protecting her rider. Ash felt that he had become stronger, and with one strike, repelled the attackers who tried to break through to him. He ordered the enemies to retreat, holding on the Valkyrie with a horned spear in his hands. Thanks to his strength, Ash managed to stop the attackers and did not allow them to surround him. The appearance of Ash and his allies made the opponents lose the desire to fight. The Valkyrie became worried because Ash had moved too far away from Baruka's army. Ash realized that his physical enhancement was significantly stronger than the magic of the Fontana soldiers due to a larger mana reserve. He concluded that the size of the mana reserve directly determined a person's strength. Ash entrusted Beto and Vargas to protect the allies while he himself moved to the center of the enemy formation. Vargas stayed to lead the squad and ordered Madoka, along with others, to cover Ash. Ash, Beto, and Vargas targeted a heavily armed group in the very center of Fontana's army. Ash decided that if he broke this squad, the rest of the enemies would lose the will to fight. Enemy warriors created a dense wall of shields before them and moved towards him. Ash rushed into the attack, trying to break through the formation before he was trapped. His allies noticed that the opponent's equipment significantly outweighed theirs, although the mana reserve was the same. Ash realized that the thick armor reduced mobility, but gave the warriors huge protection. Fontana's soldiers confidently decided they could easily surround him with small groups. Beto hit the enemies from an unexpected direction, and Ash recognized him as an accurate ally. Suddenly, a squad commander appeared before Ash, whom he had not seen since his childhood. Ash recognized the stranger as the leader of the enemy cavalry. The commander explained that Ash was too young to remember him. The enemy introduced himself as Raymond and turned out to be a member of the Fontana family, which ruled these lands. Ash remembered that it was Raymond who once ordered the Valkyrie's horns to be cut off and took away his right to the land. Raymond confirmed that he sent the tax collector to destroy Ash's family, so the old debt turned out to be personal. Ash was angered by Raymond's cruelty, but the allies reminded him not to lose control. Enemy fighters in armor advanced again, taking advantage of the tension between the two leaders. Ash realized that Raymond was deliberately stalling for time so that the encirclement would close around him. He understood that each nobleman possessed a special magic that strengthened his power over people. Ash learned about the naming ceremony, through which the nobility could grant their chosen one's battle magic. He realized that magic had become a privilege of the wealthy, although it once could have been accessible to many people. Ash understood that the path to knighthood required recognition from the nobility and turned people into dependent servants. An outcast could be deprived of their surname, land, and family ties. Ash realized that his surname Baruka was connected with earth magic, and therefore he could change the rules of this system. Raymond used the ice spear, the family magic of Fontana, and launched a hail of ice blades at them. Enemy warriors surrounded Ash and Valkyrie, forcing them to shield themselves from ice on all sides. Ash decided that the only way out was to quickly repel the attack. Beto rushed to defend his friend, but the threat prevented him from getting close easily. Ash tried to coordinate his mana reserve with physical enhancement to stop the spell. It seemed to him that time slowed down when he finally felt the rhythm of the enemy's magic. Ash understood how to direct the ice spear and his own shots to change the trajectory of the attacks. He noticed that Vargas held better in battle because he had battlefield survival experience. Ice shards struck Vargas, but he withstood the blow. Ash feared for his comrade, watching as the ice spell continued to strike the formation. He could not dodge all the projectiles, because then the blows would have hit Beto and Valkyrie. Vargas realized that the enemy was aiming at him to keep Ash in place. He recalled his former weakness and accepted the fight, using a two-sword technique. Vargas broke through the icy projectiles, proving that his strength no longer depended on fear. Ash saw how Vargas firmly stood on his feet before the enemy shields. He realized that reliable comrades were beside him, and he himself was no longer a helpless child. When the icy storm finally ceased, the allies believed they could fight for their freedom. The writer's gratitude did not have time to comfort Ars, because he noticed a fresh bloody wound on the side of the Valkyrie. An arrow fell near the hooves, and Ars immediately understood that they were already targeted. Seeing the wounded Valkyrie, Beto went mad and rushed at the knights who had set an ambush. Rage gave Beto the strength to break through the enemy ranks, but several armed fighters immediately surrounded him. Ars asked Vargas to cover Beto, but the distance and the tight circle of enemies made assistance almost impossible. Realizing that ordinary reinforcement would not be enough, Ars began to look for a way to break through the heavy armor. Beto's strike only pressed the knight's breastplate inward, but did not stop the defender. The next furious attack crushed the armor and threw one of the attackers directly into the comrades. The enemy knights became alert upon hearing the crack of metal under Beto's pressure. Beto's strength proved so great that he shattered armor that ordinary peasants could not handle. Ars assessed the enemy's numerical superiority and realized that Beto and Vargas would not hold out long alone. While Beto held the front, Vargas flanked the knights and broke their formation. Commander Raymond acknowledged the peasants' strength with surprise, but was confident his squad would still win. Raymond's calm concealed a dangerous advantage, and Ars sensed in his figure a threat stronger than all the knights. When Raymond raised the sword wrapped in icy power, the air around the blade became eerily cold. Raymond noticed that Ars had more mana, but was convinced that skilled mastery of the ice sword would decide the battle. The rider charged straight at the boy, hoping to end the clash with a single strike. Ars met the attack with his own blade and directed all available magical enhancement into it. For a moment, the boy was stunned by the discovery that the clash had produced real ice. His own magic worked, and Ars's ice shield stopped Raymond's deadly blow. Raymond responded with the full force of the icy spiritual sword, covering his weapon with sharp crystals. The ice grew after each strike, closing the distance and pressing harder and harder on Ars. A powerful lunge wounded the Valkyrie of Ars and forced the boy to lose balance in the saddle. The blood near the hooves hinted to Ars that the next clash could be the last. Even by strengthening himself with mana, the boy barely held back Raymond's pressure. Losing his horse, Ars found himself on the ground and realized how uneven the fight with the rider was. Raymond easily caught up with him on the Valkyrie, so retreating on foot gave no chance at all. Then Ars sharply turned and used a dispersal shot directly at the pursuer. The magic explosion hit the ground in front of the Valkyrie and knocked her rapid pace off. The frightened animal reared up, and Raymond lost the speed advantage. Taking advantage of the moment, Ars rushed forward and threw the rider along with the Valkyrie. When Raymond fell, the opponents finally found themselves on equal footing, although his enhancement remained stronger. Not wanting to lose the chance, Ars attacked the commander before he could stand up. The knights shielded Raymond, and Ars's icy blade shattered against their combined defense. A broken sword and tight encirclement momentarily deprived the boy of confidence. Ars tried to break through to Raymond, but enemy fighters instantly blocked the way. Coordinated strikes by the knights forced him to dodge between blades and completely disrupted the swift assault. Against heavy armor, Ars lacked not only strength, but also the coordination with which the enemies covered each other. Despite fatigue, the boy continued knocking knights off their feet and slowly clearing space. Redistributing mana, Ars strengthened his body just enough to maintain pace and avoid premature exhaustion. One by one the knights fell, and Ars himself remained among them, barely catching his breath. After the exhausting clash, the field around the boy was covered with defeated enemies and weapon fragments. Raymond acknowledged that his squad was broken, but noticed that Ars had almost exhausted his mana reserve. The commander charged again, hoping to finish off the boy with one last surge. Ars constricted like a boa, as if ready to surrender, and forced Raymond to carelessly step onto the prepared area. The ground suddenly trembled under the commander's feet, alerting even those who stood aside. Cracks spread between the opponents, while Raymond searched too late for the source of danger. Ars's smile revealed the trap, just as the ground beneath the enemy finally collapsed. Instead of a usual strike, the boy directed his power into the channel and launched a hidden water attack. At the Allies' signal, the river burst its banks, turning the maneuver prepared by Ars into a real flood. Whole herds of Valkyries broke out from the water curtain, and Raymond realized that Ars had concealed his main trump card until the end. Ars summoned magical horses into the attack, directing them straight at the bewildered knights. The boy's icy charge pushed the Valkyries forward, and the swift avalanche gained devastating speed. Beto only managed to see the herd rush past him toward the enemy formation. The Valkyries crashed into the knights and scattered them, leaving Raymond no time to restore command. The commander realized with horror that Ars had turned against him the very magic that Baruka possessed. While Raymond could not believe in defeat, Ars broke through to him and ended the duel with a decisive blow. The representative of Fontana fell, and his men acknowledged the victory of the peasant army of Baruka. Ars raised the sword over the liberated Baruka, and the crowd responded with loud celebration. The exhausted boy first checked the wounded Valkyrie and heard with relief that she would survive. Thus Baruka won the battle, and her people set up camp on the northern bank of the river. The old rider admitted that he almost died of fear, although it was he who, together with Ars and Beto, brought the Valkyries. The allies argued about whose contribution was more important, while Ars unsuccessfully tried to calm their boasting. After a short rest, the general asked Ars what he would do with the abandoned weapons and the enemy's advantage. About 200 defectors sided with Baruka, but the most valuable prize turned out to be information. 6 captured knights agreed to talk, and the general immediately reported this to Ars. From the prisoners, it became known that Fontana has 5,000 conscripts and is capable of gathering even more. Ars predicted a war of attrition, since prolonged unrest could attract neighboring rulers. Not seeking a new battle, he decided to show such power that Fontana would agree to negotiations. The plan required a convincing symbol of might, capable of stopping the enemy before the next clash. Ars proposed to build a real castle on the captured land and make it proof of Baruka's authority. Simple walls were not enough. so the boy added a river moat and a stronger defense system to the design. The old master was captivated by the idea, but immediately reminded that without residential buildings, the fortification would not become a castle. Towers, stairs, and additional parapets appeared on the drawing, turning the walls into a full-fledged fortress. Ars supplemented the plan with a central tower, where they were to rest and keep the memory of victory. Wide roads were to connect Baruka, Linda, and the castle, and Valkyries were to stand guard on the towers. For construction, Ars distributed people according to their level of magic, so that everyone worked where they brought the most benefit. The master gladly agreed to help, although Ars's increasingly bold orders began to scare him a little. Tall watchtowers and walls grew almost instantly, proving how dangerous the boy's power had become. With the next spell, Ars surrounded the fortress with a moat and strengthened its outer defensive belt. At the same time, the walls protected Linda, and the new road connected the village with Baruka and the castle. Seeing the completed towers, the boy allowed himself to sincerely rejoice in the scale of what was created for the first time. The path between the settlements shortened the journey to one day, brought new volunteers, and delivered news from Baruka. The message about Father Paulo's visit made Ars return home much less joyfully. The priest greeted Ars so calmly that the boy immediately suspected an unpleasant conversation. Father Paulo made it clear that he had already heard about all of Ars's affairs during his absence. He was especially outraged by the unauthorized naming, and the boy realized that it would be difficult to justify himself. Paulo explained, each naming created a mana channel between the giver and the named person. Those who used spells were called sorcerers, but those capable of independently creating magic were extremely few. The most powerful sorcerers were called mages, as they could create spells with words alone. According to legend, the gods gave one such mage the power of naming, but he used it for his own purposes. The mage became the founder of the Church of the Holy Light and turned his ability into the foundation of a new doctrine. By spreading harmless, everyday spells, the Church accustomed people to accept names without fear. Through this ritual, the mana of the parents passed to the children, and part of the child's power returned to the elders. Ars realized with horror that the name had created an entire magical hierarchy of dependence. Paulo warned the boy used the church secret without permission and endangered his own life. The thought of punishment made Ars panic, although the priest had not yet made a final decision. The church usually conducted rituals for the nobility itself, so the boy's unauthorized actions seemed especially audacious. Paulo explained that the church restrains the accumulation of mana, otherwise noble families would become uncontrollably powerful. Regular almsgiving was not only a gratitude to God, but also a way to safely divert excess mana. Realizing that the church also took money for diverting mana, Ars felt both a violator and a victim of the system. He was interested in whether the power really passed only from child to parents, and not further along the entire chain. Paulo confirmed the suspicion. After Ars's naming, his own mana reserve increased many times over. During the baptism, it was Paulo himself who created a magical bond between them, so part of the boy's power flowed to him. It turned out that the pack of Valkyries was also connected to Ars and transmitted part of their mana to him. Since the offspring of the Valkyries inherited Ars's magic, each new generation subtly strengthened the boy. Countless small streams combined into one force, and Ars was horrified at how much it resembled a magical pyramid. Thanks to the influx of mana, Paulo rose from priest to bishop and now controlled the entire church of the region. The new rank opened to him a healing spell that he had never studied before. Those who had enough mana mastered the transmitted spells instinctively, while the weaker ones did not even know about them. After explaining the system, Paulo offered Ars to give him his future and come under the protection of the church. The bishop listed the murder of tax collectors, the capture of knights, the attack on neighboring lands, and the theft of church secrets. Ars realized that he was not formally part of the rebels, but the consequences of his actions could no longer be avoided. Then the boy proposed to honestly tell about all the violations, knowing that the biggest problem was the church itself. Paulo agreed to help if Baruka would expel Fontana and send the peasants home. The bishop reminded that he was the one who named Ars, so there was already mutual dependence between them. Instead of complete submission, Paulo asked the boy to protect the inhabitants of Baruka and allowed him to learn the hidden motives. The bishop's promotion depended on Ars's mana, and the boy's death could deprive Paulo of the acquired rank. Unauthorized namings further strengthened their bond, so it was beneficial for both to maintain good relations. Paulo hinted that minor errors in church reports often occur and can conceal part of the truth. For silence, the bishop demanded alms and the return of money spent on lands and church affairs. Ars agreed to pay because the official registration of mass namings would have cost him even more. The named sum was almost equal to all the boy's savings, and he barely restrained his despair. Paulo knew well about his wealth, but presented the high fee as the proper price for the caused disorder. Ars agreed to spend money, but asked the bishop to help resolve the conflict with the Fontana family. To find a way out, Paulo forced the boy to imagine himself in Fontana's place and identify their most painful problem. Most nobles were frightened that the inhabitants of Baruca possessed magic and could pass it on to others. Ars suggested presenting the naming as a personal whim and refuting the existence of the rebellious noble. Paulo was going to confirm this version throughout the territory of Fontana, although he warned Ars about the personal risk. Having become the bishop of the region, he gained enough influence to negotiate directly with the ruling family. For reconciliation, Paulo was ready to perform the ritual and use Ars's offering as proof of loyalty. Entrusting him with the fate of Baruca, the boy remained to wait for the result in the fortified city. Meanwhile, people discussed the new bishop and recalled that he was the one who conducted the naming of Baruca. One of the nobles did not expect Paulo to rise so quickly and gain political weight. Another decided that the church was only at risk because Ars had become too important a figure. While the boy was organizing the army, news finally arrived about the completed negotiations. Paulo returned with representatives of Fontana in just a few days and stated that the main conditions had already been agreed upon. The final decision was to be confirmed by direct negotiations between the two parties. The meeting was scheduled on neutral territory where no army could impose a force advantage. Ars climbed to the empty watchtower chosen for the secret conversation. An unknown young man immediately recognized the leader of Baruca in him and carefully assessed the opponent. His arrogance surprised Ars, since Fontana had brought almost no guards and the negotiator looked too young. The stranger introduced himself as Carlos, which only increased the boy's wariness. Ars froze upon learning that before him personally stood the young head of the Fontana clan. Carlos had already received all the information from Bishop Paulo and did not intend to waste time on explanations. The proposal to end the war seemed advantageous, but Ars refused to agree without his own conditions. The boy's audacious firmness interested Carlos more than it frightened him. The head of Fontana extended a peace treaty, acknowledging that Ars himself held the heart of the rebellion. The terms included cessation of hostilities, disbanding the army, returning prisoners and the sword, as well as a new status for Baruca and Ars. Carlos promised not to cancel the agreements, although he left technical details for official formalization. Carlos admitted that even if Ars refused, Raymond's subordinates no longer had the strength to continue the war. Raymond's death struck him not with sorrow, but with benefit, since Ars had removed Fontana's most dangerous rival. 3 years ago, Carlos's father was killed, and Raymond's relatives placed an obedient child at the head of the domain. Raymond ruled everything in the boy's name, eliminating heirs and turning the Fontana family into a puppet. Raymond even appropriated the position of representative for himself, and official contracts were sealed with the Fontana family crest. Carlos realized that Raymond was also responsible for the order to supply the Valkyries, which affected Baruca. It was this mistake that opened the opportunity to crush the usurper's power with foreign hands. Although Raymond died before a personal arrest, his death returned real power over the family to Carlos. However, removing the commander was not enough, because the forces he had subdued could rise in rebellion again. Raymond's family pretended to be submissive for now, but Carlos was sure they were only waiting for the right moment. To prevent a new coup, the young ruler decided to turn Ars into a counterbalance to the old nobility. He recognized in the boy an equal rival who fought without fear of foreign power. In return, Carlos promised what Ars could not obtain on his own. The price of service was the lives of Baruca's inhabitants and their freedom. The agreement included all the lands and wealth that Ars had already managed to create and protect. Carlos personally guaranteed Baruca's rights as the head of Fontana, alleviating the boy's main fear. Ars understood that the young lord's word was not yet unshakable, but at least it gave the village official protection. By rejecting the proposal, he would have lost the support of Paulo and the church, so he agreed to become Carlos's sword. The boy still added his own conditions, and secret negotiations continued until late at night. By dawn, the parties agreed on the basis of peace and prepared the way for a public treaty. For the official ratification of the agreement, everyone gathered in the church. Bishop Paulo placed the document with the final peace terms before the parties. Ars and Carlos together confirmed their consent, despite the obvious distrust between their people. After that, Paulo called Ars Baruca to the altar for a solemn oath. Carlos was the first to swear to serve and support the head of the Fontana family. Ars pledged to become his knight, to help in battle and protect the people. As a sign of the oath, the boy knelt before Carlos and accepted the touch of the sword. The young lord declared Ars Baruca his knight. A magical circle shone around them, sealing the new name and mana bond. From now on, the boy was officially called Ars von Baruca. The name created a channel to the strongest mana source in the region and strengthened Carlos's power. Through the new bond, Ars and his people gained access to the ice spear of Fontana. The magic of the noble family became available to Baruca, opening a completely different level of power to the army. Returning to the castle, Ars finally decided to engage in life on his own land. The spacious fortress turned out to be cozy inside, but the boy still did not know where to start peaceful governance. The old master enthusiastically praised him for Baruca, Linda, and the North River Castle. In fact, Carlos initially wanted to give only Baruca, and Ars defended the other possessions in negotiations. Having received the land and the knightly title, the boy quickly felt the burden of new responsibilities. The most painful realization was that almost all the savings had disappeared, and the territory required constant expenses. Taxes to Fontani and maintaining the army forced Ars to immediately seek new sources of income. Without stable profit, Carlos could take away everything created, so delaying was dangerous. Ars decided to start by organizing internal administration. Reports, requests, and bills streamed to the castle, turning peaceful governance into a mountain of paperwork. Lilina received an alarming message, and for a moment lost her usual calm in front of the maid. She feared that inexperienced Carlos would not hold power, and Raymond's supporters would exploit his weakness. The memory of the fallen patron and the old rebellion forced Lilina to prepare for a new confrontation. The maid noticed the change in her mood, but did not dare to ask unnecessary questions. Lilina hid her anxiety behind a calm smile and returned to her plans. She decided to use her blood kinship with Carlos and be ready for any development of events. Meanwhile, Ars gathered people to announce the first composition of the Baruchi knighthood administration. Merchant Asen headed the accounts and internal affairs because he could read, write, and knew arithmetic well. Beto and Vargas became captains of the standing army, which was to replace the unreliable peasant militia. The son of a local resident took charge of security and received a strict order to punish offenders according to the rule of 3 warnings. Madoc and the elders of Baruca and Linda became judges, and Gran retained leadership of the craftsmen. To the rest of the volunteers, Ars offered paid work and transformed the former crowd into a staff of workers. Experience in building roads and a castle convinced the boy that even illiterate people are capable of giving excellent practical advice. Ars decided to use the ingenuity of the residents, rather than reject them solely due to lack of education. Thus was born the Black Company of Baruca, where every capable worker had to give all their strength to the territory. Bishop Paulo called Ars a monster upon hearing about the new way of organizing people. The priest was most outraged that the boy came again for his precious money. Having spent his savings on the church, Ars asked Merchant Asen to invest funds in a new venture. He proposed sharing the profit, and Paulo promised at least to consider the land as a useful donation. The merchant reminded Ars that the new power was still fragile, and Carlos would easily take the territory at the first serious mistake. Friendship with Carlos did not change the hostility of his vassals and old nobles towards the former peasant. Ars realized that simple order was not enough. Baruca had to become a force that no one would dare to take away. For this, the boy decided to open a market and accumulate money as quickly as possible. Paulo mocked the idea because he did not believe that merchants would voluntarily go to a remote knighthood. Asen explained that the borders of the possessions were pledged with paid checkpoints. Inside each territory, merchants also paid numerous guilds for transportation, sales, and the very right to trade. Then Ars conceived a free market without guilds, where permitted goods could be sold without unnecessary intermediaries. Even Asen admitted that merchants would still not be able to completely avoid fees on the way to Baruca. Despite doubts, Ars decided to create a city and a system that would attract merchants from other lands by themselves. The first step was a new road from the city of Fontana through the North River Castle to Baruka. During the construction of the bridge, Ars ordered not to disturb the bird nests in order to preserve the favorable condition of the peace treaty. Beto explained that Fontana recognized the path as military and feared that it would be used against the city. Ars agreed to keep most of the soldiers in the castle, although such caution made the allies look like suspicious neighbors. He could quickly build a new fortress, but did not want to constantly prove his strength to Carlos. Instead, the boy decided to turn the North River Castle into a coaching inn between Fontana and Baruka. Within a few days, the mages leveled the land, expanded the fields, and completed the shortest trade route. Other workers laid side roads that connected the new highway with the settlements. Experienced farmers created paths so quickly that Ars did not hide his admiration. He praised the people for the excellent work, but immediately began to think about what to occupy them with after the construction was completed. Without new tasks in their own farms, the workers could be left without money and housing. Ars realized that providing homes and jobs also restrained crime and maintained peace. A new settlement grew on the outskirts of Baruka, capable of accommodating those who did not have their own land. The boy announced that anyone willing could settle there. 4 kilometers from the walls, he allocated territory for housing and prepared 2 main crafts for the inhabitants. The first was the production of hardened bricks, although the raw materials had to be extracted from dangerous horns and tusks. The second craft was the cultivation of magical mushrooms that provided a huge reserve of mana. Mushrooms could be harvested from a single log for years, and the settlers gladly accepted such a reliable income. Ars refused the monopoly on the profitable product because in the war for survival, territory was more important than personal profit. Large reserves of mana potions were supposed to allow the army to use magic longer and create numerous fortifications. Baruka received new goods, but the next problem became relations with the farmers. Tired, Ars began with a land survey to understand the size and value of each field. Beto did not know such a concept, so the boy had to explain the connection between plot area, yield, and taxes. The writer refused to command the surveyors, and Ars handed over the training of peasants to another assistant. Thanks to leveling and soil improvement, the harvest was supposed to increase sharply, but the boy did not want to immediately pressure with taxes. Without measuring instruments, Ars proposed counting the use of magic, each covering a square with a side of 10 meters. Kyle immediately understood the simple method, and Ars sincerely praised his ingenuity. Recalling Kyle's old fear of Raymond, the boy defined 1 acre as the area of 1 application of land leveling. Kyle still blamed himself for the Valkyrie's injury and the attack, although Ars and his mother repeatedly assured him otherwise. For accurate land accounting, Ars defined a meter as 1/10 of the side of the plot covered by leveling. Dividing the meter into centimeters, he immediately established units of volume, weight, and the boiling point of water. Ars entrusted Kyle with spreading the new system, as he himself could not explain it to every inhabitant. The faith of the elder brother restored the boy's confidence, and he agreed to take on the important task. Thus, the measurement system familiar to Ars appeared in the knighthood of Baruki. The next problem was storing the harvest, since even improved fields did not save food from spoilage. Ars built a huge warehouse, but an ordinary stone building still could not preserve products for long. Thick walls barely let in light and air, but this was insufficient without constant cold. To turn the room into a freezer, the boy began filling it with magical ice. 1 icy spear after another pierced inside, and Asen feared that Ars would simply destroy the warehouse. Ice blocks crumbled on the floor, while the master advised the boy to rest at least a little. Ars enlisted helpers and ordered to tightly fill the space with ice up to the very walls. A layer of sawdust slowed the melting, completing a huge indoor freezer. Inside, persistent cold was maintained, so grain and vegetables no longer spoiled after harvest. Small ice boxes could store meat in every household, and Ars planned to sell the surplus. Success with the warehouse inspired Gran with a bolder idea to build another castle in Baruka. Ars hesitated because the main forces were already concentrated in Baruka and the North River Fortress. Gran insisted on the new stronghold, although the peace treaty allowed only a limited garrison in the old castle. The castle was to become visible proof of the young ruler's wealth, skill, and power. Ars feared new suspicions, since after Raymond everyone already knew about his military strength. However, Gran noted that part of the population had never seen a peaceful ruler. Without a symbol of power, people could refuse to pay taxes only because their lord was a child. The master was already dreaming of surpassing the decoration of the Northern River Castle, and Ars understood his true enthusiasm. The magnificent residence was meant to help people accept the new ruler, although the appearance of merchants remained uncertain. The best knightly structure stood far from Ars himself, so his own castle still seemed appropriate. But one fortress was not enough. The boy had to settle the territory and at the same time prepare for a possible campaign. Ars decided to create the heart of knighthood, a large castle city capable of supporting an army and surviving an attack. The land beyond the walls, which he once considered personal, now had to be open to future inhabitants. The attractive city was supposed to bring settlers itself, and following them crafts and trade. By protecting their own homes, people would be more willing to stand beside Ars without coercion. The plan divided future Baruchania into a central part, 4 districts, and a double ring of walls. At first, Ars decided to build up the space between the inner and outer walls, leaving the castle for last. The southern district was allocated for the housing of Beidou, Graina, and the merchant Asen, and nearby a place for a free market was designated. Even after this, a huge unoccupied space remained inside the walls. Ars divided the southern and western quarters into plots for sale to new residents. The wooded northeast was designated for lumberjacks and charcoal burners who needed constant access to timber. Nearby, papermakers and mushroom growers were settled, as both crafts also depended on the forest. Ars left the northwest for fodder fields for the Valkyries and future military needs. Near the western gate, warriors were to train, and experienced Beidou and Vargas were to prepare the recruits. Separately, the boy planned a prison for those detained by the new guard. A courtroom was allocated for minor cases, while Ars intended to personally handle serious crimes. Construction of the southern quarter continued, and all buildings were made in advance from hardened brick. Asen was stunned to see how quickly the empty land was turning into a real city. The merchant admitted he had never seen anything like it, while Ars calmly awaited the final assessment. Even the experienced Asen barely found words before the scale of the invested labor. From the height, Baruchania already seemed larger than the city of Fontana. Straight streets, spacious houses with arches and glass windows made the new city unusually neat and expensive. Asen admitted that such beauty would surprise any traveler, although Ars was already asking him for the next favor. Having finished the inner quarters, the boy set about strengthening the outer wall. Due to the huge perimeter, Ars abandoned the continuous magical brick and limited himself to towers at each corner. It was impossible to raise the entire defensive belt alone, so the construction was divided among the workers. The new wall embraced the city with a wide ring and separated the residential quarters from the surrounding lands. Ars recreated 200-meter towers modeled after the Northern River Castle, spending mountains of mana potions on them. He left the defense of the upper tier to Beidou and Vargas and demanded additional improvements from Gran. The master arranged convenient positions on the wall, which Ars immediately wanted to replicate in the old fortress. Stocks of hardened bricks allowed dropping heavy blocks on attackers without leaving cover. Until better weapons appeared, bricks were to become a simple and cheap means of defense. Having exhausted the mana reserve, Ars pondered the next defensive line. Around the walls, they dug a 10-meter ditch, relying on the skills of experienced lumberjacks. There was not enough water for it, so the ditch was reinforced with vines, and bridges were thrown to the 4 wide gates. The lifting mechanisms allowed instantly cutting off the enemy's path to the city. People with icy spears could simultaneously raise the bridges, completing the unusual defense system. Thus, in the middle of the former wasteland, the fortress city of Baruchania was born. Glass windows in every house unexpectedly caused a shortage. Merchants sold even the reserves. Asen explained that it was precisely the example of Baruchania that made people see glass as a valuable building material. New houses became models to follow, and the demand for glass sharply increased. To settle the city faster, Ars conceived mass production of the needed goods. The merchant predicted unheard-of profits, and the boy already wanted to turn glassmaking into a spell. This proposal depressed Graina because the craftsman did not like replacing complex skill with monotonous magic. Ars did not understand his resistance, since hardened brick had long been created precisely by enchantment. The master objected that glass required a completely different art and could not be reduced to a simple material. Hardened brick depended on rare raw materials, while glass opened up many new products. A single enchantment would stop creativity at one form and turn Baruka into a supplier of identical goods. Sand and coal were available, so masters could develop the craft without a magical template. Ars suggested to Gran to create lenses from glass and gave him only a general idea. The sudden challenge captivated the master, and he immediately promised to exceed expectations. While Gran worked, Ars calmly drank hot tea for the first time in a long while. Hector reminded that the fortress center was still empty, although the inner walls were already standing. Ars brushed off another conversation about the castle, but a familiar voice outside the window interrupted the dispute. Beto and Vargas came to their commander with a new military problem. Seeing them under the tower, Ars went down to find out the reason for the quarrel. One captain demanded to train warriors in offense, another in defense, and neither wanted to yield. Ars invited both to the table, hoping to turn the shouting into a calm conversation. Hector brought tea in the middle of the dispute, involuntarily easing the tension. Summarizing the positions, Ars saw the strength of both approaches. Beto argued that without attack victory could not be won, while Vargas relied on castles and deterrence. The boy recalled his own fight with Fontana, where fear and haste almost made him attack recklessly. Beto considered his swiftness the key to victory, but Ars did not want to make a thoughtless charge the only tradition. Survival required not rushing at an enemy stronger in number and experience. Vargas's defensive skill was valuable, but without proper training, the fortress would not save inexperienced people. A purely defensive fight seemed too risky to Ars, especially considering Carlos's precarious position. If the young ruler lost power, no fortification would guarantee Barusai's support. The army should not specialize in only one type of combat, because the future threat remained unknown. The hostility of other knights forced Baruka to rely primarily on his own strength. Ars decided to teach each squad to flexibly change tactics and independently save comrades. The knowledge and combat power of each warrior had to approach the level of a squad commander. Beto and Vargas doubted the realism of the plan, but they had no other reliable support. The dispute finally showed Ars which skills the Baruka army lacked. It remained to find a way to pass these skills to a large number of recruits. Hector unexpectedly suggested to Ars to conquer lands and increase power if peaceful rule did not satisfy him. The boy categorically rejected conquest, surprising his interlocutor with sincere fear of war. Ars wanted to protect only his status and land, because memories of a peaceful past did not allow him to take deaths lightly. But among endless clashes of nobles, absolute pacifism was impossible, so it was necessary to prepare for battle. Under Ars's command, the recruits began the first major training of the future army. The training opened with riding on Valkyries with saddles and stirrups, which required painful physical strengthening. The first attempts exhausted the people, but gradually they learned to stay on fast animals. Those who mastered horseback riding moved on to using magic in motion. The riders trained a scatter shot, trying to hit without losing control over the Valkyrie. After an accurate shot, they moved on to a more complex ice spear. A large number of Valkyries became Baruka's main advantage and the foundation of the new army. Ars chose the style of magical cavalry, capable of maneuvering and attacking from a distance. The riders simultaneously directed spells at a single designated target. Maintaining distance, the squad bombarded the giant boar with icy strikes. Focused fire stopped the monster before it reached the horses. Successful hunting proved that such tactics would work even against a hardened boar. The leading Valkyrie controlled the herd, allowing the riders to maintain order almost effortlessly. After long training, the first unit of Baruka's magical cavalry was ready. Gran meanwhile completed the assignment, hardly resting during work. The master brought a strange device to the tower, which was supposed to enhance the observer's vision. Several lenses gathered and refracted light, forming binoculars for distant targets. Ars knew the principle only approximately, so he could not reproduce the complex construction with magic. Through the new device, he clearly saw distant fields and houses beyond the walls for the first time. The binoculars even allowed him to make out the mother, hanging laundry near the house. Seeing the result from a rough sketch, Ars acknowledged Gran's talent as much higher than his own explanations. The first snow covered Baruka, and the master's return made the beginning of winter especially warm for the family. Ours worked by the window, while the cold outside the walls made everyone warm their tea more often. A year passed without Carlos's senseless orders, and the rebuilt Baruca did not engage in direct combat even once. Roads quickly brought troops to the centers of the rebellion, and fortresses grew right near enemy bases. In strategic places, 10-meter walls appeared overnight, blocking the rebels' path. Seeing numerous detachments, roads, and fortifications, most of the enemies lost the will to resist. One by one, the rebels raised the white flag, even before the assault began. Carlos personally led rare campaigns, and ours convinced him to cancel gatherings on the roads in the liberated areas. Free movement of goods brought Fontani more profit, although Carlos watched the advisor more closely. Cities flourished, and Baruca grew wealthy on the northern border, until snow stopped trade and military challenges. In severe frost, ours suddenly remembered how long it had been since he took a hot bath. Kyle perceived the desire to warm up in water as another strange whim of his brother. After months of managing finances, ours keenly felt how much he missed ordinary rest. At the call to the room, a Valkyrie entered and impatiently nudged the master toward the door. The animal persistently suggested a trip, and the boy followed it through the snow. In a warm cloak from Graina, ours calmly allowed the Valkyrie to choose the path herself. She led him to a dark gorge where steam rose from beneath the stones. Hot water amid the snow revealed to ours a real underground spring. The Valkyrie found it during an ancient crossing over the river and remembered the owner's talks about bathing. The boy realized that the resort would attract people even in winter, but he did not want to stay far from the city. Returning, ours asked Vargas to allocate land in Linda for the new project. The spring lay between the villages and the river, so the general did not understand why to hurry in the middle of winter. Ours planned to bring hot water to Linda and turn the village into a resort. The roadside inn near the baths was to receive guests and create new winter income. To find the underground water path, the boy began marking the direction with magically buried bricks. At the hot spring, ours lowered a pipe with a filter and a cap that restrained excessive pressure. He laid an insulated channel at a slope all the way to Linda, hiding it underground so the water would not cool. It remained to fill the finished bath, and the plan seemed almost complete. But instead of a natural spring, an ordinary puddle appeared in Linda, which quickly lost heat. Clumsy work by people spoiled the open pool, but ours did not give up on the idea and set about building an inn. He added a drain valve and directed the excess water to the Barucania ditch. Kyle noted that for one bath, it would be easier to heat ordinary water from the well. The boy did not understand why his brother laid a whole pipe from the river if meditation already relieved fatigue. Ours insisted that the hot spring gave a special relief that heated water could not provide. In fact, he also wanted to impress Kyle so that he would stop considering his older brother a weirdo. The boy's enthusiasm prompted ours to show him exactly how the new bathhouse differed from the usual one. Nearby grew a large glass structure that sparkled even in the winter light. Vargas did not understand why Lindy needed a building made of tempered brick and solid glass. Ours explained that he conducted hot water for the heat necessary for the new agriculture. The small greenhouse could not hold the night cold, so he built a much larger and stronger one. The stream from the spring was supposed to constantly heat the room even after sunset. The pipes filled the greenhouse with steam, and the temperature inside immediately rose. Ours asked Vargas to entrust the villagers with winter cultivation of plants under the new conditions. Thus, in Linda, a bathing yard and a greenhouse appeared simultaneously, unfamiliar to the local world. Ours arranged the roadside in following the model of a ryokan, and the Valkyries were allowed to work even in the snow. The master thanked his favorite for having hatched from an egg and changed his life. The Valkyries tirelessly ran with the adult riders, possessed magic, and had a huge reserve of mana. Their advantages included resistance to sudden temperatures and the ability to find hot springs. The animals easily endured both cold and boiling water, so they could live almost anywhere. Kyle warmed up so much near the Valkyrie that he hugged her instead of a blanket. With the arrival of the time to depart, Asen prepared a winter trading journey. Ours took advantage of the limited movement of merchants and decided to outpace competitors in the empty market. The Hatsuki harvest from the greenhouse was loaded onto sleds to quickly deliver it to the city of Fontana. The Valkyries carried the goods through the snow, turning the winter road into Baruka's advantage. The taste of katsuki remained mediocre, but amid the shortage of fresh vegetables, buyers snapped it up instantly. In winter, ordinary people easily starved, so even modest supplies of fresh food became priceless. The elderly were often driven out of their homes, and the poor died in the alleys, while the wealthy knew no shortage. When the goods ran out, Asen promised the crowd to return the next day with a new batch. Ars calmed the people with the news that Baruka was growing whole mountains of winter katsuki. The sleds rushed again along the snowy road, not letting the trade stop. The profit exceeded expectations, and Ars felt like a Christmas giver with his own reindeer. The food delivery continued until the new year itself, bringing Baruka money and the trust of the townspeople. At the beginning of the year, the boy set off to Fontana for the first big deal of the new season. The snowy city greeted him with high walls and a crowd of festively dressed people. The path led Ars to Carlos's castle, where the official ceremony was to take place. The New Year's reception became Ars's first major duty as the ruler of Barucania. Among the nobility, the boy held himself confidently, although he carefully watched every glance. The landowners gathered to perform the ancient New Year's custom of the conquered Fontani lands. All knights had to greet the one who had knighted them last year, so the line stretched throughout the entire castle. In the great hall, each vassal in turn stood before Carlos and confirmed their service. At dinner, unfamiliar knights whispered about the young peasant who defeated Raymond. For the hereditary nobility, Ars's title mattered less than his origin, and many openly despised the upstart. Among the representatives of the upper class, the boy sharply stood out as a solitary figure. He was the only knight whom Carlos had created personally, so he had no old comrades nearby. Conversations about the armed camp and connections with a foreign nobleman revealed a possible conspiracy against Carlos. Behind polite smiles, Ars recognized supporters of Raymond who concealed hostility because of his fame. Tired of the chatter, the boy began to examine the guests' mannerisms and immediately saw the difference between them. Battle-hardened knights had a denser strength, as if unconsciously purifying it on the battlefield for years. Raymond's accomplices were distinguished neither by quality nor by mana reserves, so Ars calmly continued his dinner. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to a young woman with a completely unusual flow of power. Her presence contradicted everything seen so much that Ars forgot about food. The stranger's mana was the purest in the hall, and at the same time, strangely concentrated only near her head. The interested young man himself approached her, breaking the usual distance between guests. The girl politely accepted his address, showing neither fear nor superiority. Her gentle smile only intensified the mystery of the unusual distribution of mana. Ars could not take his eyes off the power around her head and offered to answer any questions. The stranger was confused by the boy's intrusive curiosity, who wanted to know everything about her. Realizing the ambiguity of his behavior, Ars tried to excuse himself, but made the situation even more awkward. Carlos saved him from disgrace and mockingly congratulated him on a free New Year's courtship. The head of Fontana approached the table, attracting the attention of all the guests. From the side, the conversation looked like Ars's attempt to get acquainted with the woman before Carlos himself. Instead of punishment, the Lord ordered Lilina to take Ars to a separate room and entertain him. The girl agreed because she herself wanted to talk to the strange young knight. Alone, Ars first asked where Lilina knew Carlos so well from. She calmly put aside the book and prepared to explain the old family connection. Lilina was alarmed by Ars's excessive concern for the young lord. It turned out that she and Carlos were half-brother and sister. Carlos was born from the lord's wife, while Lilina's mother was one of the servants. The same hair confirmed the kinship, but the girl did not have the brother's authority and aggression. Ars noticed Lilina's beauty, although he was still trying to understand her place at court. As a relative of the knightly house, she herself was supposed to receive guests, not wait by the table. Lilina was embarrassed. All her life she had read alone and for the first time entertained a stranger. The 16-year-old girl was carrying out Carlos's order, who could no longer ignore her reclusiveness. Calming down beside her, Ars finally returned to the reason for his interest. He told about the visible mana around her head and asked who taught her to control it. Lilina was genuinely surprised, as she did not know that concentrating power on a part of the body could strengthen it. For comparison, Ars recalled how Vargas reinforced the surface of the body, and Beto enveloped the whole body with mana. Thus, Lilina unconsciously enhanced memory, judgment, and speed of thinking, like a living version of the preservation spell. Her talent grew from constant reading, although the books themselves were rare and extremely expensive. Ars could read, but court letters and old texts seemed almost incomprehensible to him. He asked Lelina to retell a complex book in simple language. The boy was most interested in why the royal family, which united all the nobility, had lost its former power. Lelina chose the story of the decline of the royal dynasty as the best example. Opening the old tome, she warned that the explanation might not satisfy the inquisitive listener. Despite doubts, the girl agreed to recount everything she knew. The first king was an unparalleled magician who united a peaceful land isolated by nature. Through the church's system of titles, he gathered the mana of his subordinates and passed orders to magicians across the country. His descendants inherited the throne, and the families of magicians became nobles and ruled their lands for centuries. If King Nero had the gift of a founder, the dynasty's power could have been preserved. In reality, Nero was a tyrant without the abilities of a true mage. He relied only on the flows of others' mana and exterminated his subordinates, gradually losing strength as a result. When the nobility lost their own magic and weakened, Nero used a great spell capable of erasing a city from the map. The blow turned against him. The king lost accessible mana and the ability to repeat the founder's magic. Ars realized that rank, power reserves, and available spells formed a single system where loss of mana took away abilities. That is why passing on the dispersing shot and the ice spear to children could create a dangerous chain of future power. Lelina explained that the royal great spell required incredible mana, and by its very existence restrained any uprisings. Having lost this power, Nero tried to reconcile with the nobility, but many houses refused the royal title and equated his power with their own. After the fall of the tyrannical dynasty, only a few noble houses continued to obey the king. Since then, rivalry among noble houses equal in power has not ceased and has shaped the modern order. The hidden history of the kingdom impressed Ars primarily by how thoroughly Lelina knew every detail of it. The girl added that the church ban on combat spells did not allow any other house to simply replace the royal family. Seeing an extremely complex historical book in Lelina's hands, Ars was even more amazed by her erudition. Lelina admitted that she loved books the most, especially fairy tales with happy endings. Their cozy conversation was suddenly interrupted by a persistent knock on the door. A young warrior named Lion entered the library and immediately addressed Lelina as his elder sister. Lion explained that Carlos sent him to find Lelina and looked at Ars with interest. Lelina introduced the newcomer as her younger brother and acquainted him with Ars. Lion recognized Ars von Baruku, as rumors about the young ruler had already preceded him. Considering Carlos the only son of Fontana, the puzzled Ars inquired about their kinship. It turned out that Lelina and Lion were born from the same mother, but had different fathers. Because of this, Lion was not a blood relative of Carlos at all, although all three belonged to the great Fontana family. Noticing his sister's blush, Lion began to teasingly mock her about the unusually pleasant conversation with the young man. The mocking brother quickly became serious and asked Ars to take good care of Lelina. Sincere praise of Lelina's knowledge and her captivating stories noticeably moved the girl. Looking closely at Lion, Ars realized that the quality of his mana surpassed even Lelina's talent. Although Lion was only slightly older than Beto, he was already considered an adult, and the hidden power seemed insane to Ars. The young ruler noticed how Lion focused mana in his eyes and subtly assessed his abilities in response. Convinced of the exceptional potential of the new acquaintance, Ars decided to definitely talk to him later. Before parting, the embarrassed Lelina tried to say something personal to Ars, but could not summon the courage. Gathering her courage, the girl gently touched his hand, but nervousness bound her words. Lelina pulled her hand back and pretended as if nothing had happened, leaving Ars in complete confusion. Soon Carlos received Ars in his hall and welcomed him back. Without unnecessary preamble, the host announced that Ars's marriage was already finally agreed upon. The sudden news stunned the boy, who had not yet managed to realize how quickly everything was decided. Before the satisfied Carlos, the boy just froze in confusion, unable to find an appropriate response. Carlos explained that Lion had already given his consent, and Ars's good relations with Lelina finally convinced him. Embarrassed, Lelina silently awaited Ars's decision, while Lion solemnly entrusted his sister to him. Reminding him of his 10 years, the boy heard from Carlos that early engagements were quite common for the nobility. Marriage to Carlos's blood relative was meant to strengthen Ars's fragile position and give him powerful support. The young ruler understood that this was a political alliance directly linking Baruka with Carlos. Learning that Lilina's parents had already died, Ars realized how few people could protect her own choice. Even during their lifetime, the parents would hardly have objected to a profitable marriage, and Lilina herself knew from childhood that she would not be free. Like other noble girls, she was raised with the understanding that one day the family would use her marriage in negotiations. Carlos admitted that Lilina had already received many proposals and had long become a desirable match for various families. Recalling Lyon's trust, Ars worried whether he might condemn Lilina to an unhappy life with a wrong decision. Carlos pressured the boy, demanding that he quickly decide and accept Lilina into his noble family. On the way home, Ars felt that Carlos sincerely cared about his sister, but the events were still unfolding too rapidly. Lilina compared Ars's ability to absorb knowledge to dry earth that instantly absorbed water. She was a little envious of his quick learning, but immediately attributed the boy's success to the skill of his teacher. Lilina confessed that she had never before been able to discuss favorite books with someone so enthusiastically. Her happy confession made their conversation one of Ars's most pleasant memories of the trip. Riding home, Ars was puzzled over how to inform everyone about the upcoming wedding. Upon hearing the news, Beto was outraged that younger Ars would marry before him. For consolation, the young ruler Beto assumed that Lilina would bring servants, among whom he could find a good bride for himself. The fiery warrior promised to become even stronger, accomplish great feats, and definitely marry the beauty. The household joyfully congratulated Ars on the upcoming wedding, and Beto admitted that competing with him in this was pointless. The father was surprised by his son's sudden agreement to the wedding, since 10-year-old Ars had previously shown no interest in marriage. The boy explained that the union with Lilina promised significant benefits to all of Barucania, which again touched the lonely Beto. At the same time, Ars sincerely considered Lilina a good and kind girl, so political advantage was not the only reason for his consent. The preparation for the wedding pushed Gran to build the castle even faster, although he had started construction without proper permission. The masters planned to transform the future residence into a luxurious symbol of power, and Beto noticed how the groom hurried the work. The best house worthy of Lilina Fontani was ordered by the young ruler to overshadow the old estate. Despite the need not to irritate the overlord with excessive splendor, the boy allowed himself a little exaggeration for the sake of his future wife. Thus began the construction of a true castle of Barucania, and the simplest way to give it grandeur was a towering tower. Due to the complex maintenance of the structure, the boy refused excessive height and decided to show power through thoughtful scale. Seeking an expressive image, he recalled divine figures from a past life, surrounded by radiant halos. From memories of lighting in another world, Ars came up with the idea to give the castle an almost sacred appearance. A sudden inspiration suggested to the boy a detail capable of transforming an ordinary building into an unforgettable residence. The new idea led the boy to Gran with a proposal to widely use glass, for which many orders were already coming in Barucania. Instead of usual windows, he conceived decoration that would simultaneously create an impression of beauty and unshakable strength. The central ornament of the future castle, Ars decided to make a huge colored stained glass window. Every visitor was to pass by this wonder on the way to the audience hall and immediately feel the grandeur of the ruler of Barucania. The boy imagined how multicolored light would fall on his back and create an almost supernatural image. Gran noted that such a hall would resemble a cathedral, and Ars suggested selecting colors according to his own mana. Having received Ars's sketches, Gran quickly turned them into detailed drawings of the new castle. Due to the changing angle of the sun's rays, the builders carefully determined the orientation of the hall, and the fragile glass was protected by strong walls. Gran was fascinated by the idea and added secret passages for escape during the worst danger to the plan. Next to the ceremonial halls, residential rooms were designed, and in winter the residents were involved in making tempered bricks. The castle included rooms for meetings and receptions, a spacious audience hall, and a huge stained glass window behind the throne. While Gran was managing the main construction, Ars personally took on developing colored glass. Before creating the full-size stained glass, he began testing various patterns on small models. The first attempts revealed flaws. The glass took up too much space, and the heavy structure even caused a crack in the wall. After numerous corrections, Ars together with Carl created an amazingly precise miniature model of the building. Seeing the realistic miniature, Carl suggested that such products would be bought by both children and noble art connoisseurs. After approving the large version of the structure, Gran set about reproducing it in real scale and inserting the stained glass. Carl reminded that his magic could instantly connect parts of the models, and Ars enthusiastically entrusted him to continue the work. The young ruler realized that he had become so accustomed to magical construction that he forgot about the impossibility of such miniatures in the past world. When the finished castle already towered over Baruchania, Lion arrived at Ars's place on the eve of the wedding ceremony. The guest did not hide his admiration for the residence, which the builders had completed only a few days before his arrival. Ars solemnly led Lion through the entrance hall and showed the locations of the residential, reception, and ceremonial rooms. The young warrior was most impressed by the sunlit audience hall with a huge colored stained glass window. Lion noted that the majestic castle needed a princess, but explained Lilina's low status in the Fontana family. She descended from a previous ruler and a servant, and did not even live in the main estate, so formally she was not equal to Carlos. The conversation reminded Ars of Carlos's story about how Raymond destroyed the influence of the once famous Grem family. Lion explained that the Grems had served the Fontana for many generations, and once even led their own knighthood. After his father's death, Raymond took advantage of political hostility and divided their lands among other vassals. Although the old conflict had long subsided, it was almost impossible to regain the lost territory through Carlos. The former holdings of the Grems ended up in the hands of several knightly houses, so a forceful or legal return threatened new quarrels. Lion rejected vain complaints about the past and decided to focus on what he could still do for the future. Gathering his courage, he addressed Ars with an important personal request. Lion asked to be accepted into service to revive the name and status of the Grem family through military merits. The young man wanted to become the commander of the vanguard detachment, although his impoverished family could not provide him with their own warriors. Once the knighthood of the Grems stood at the top, and representatives of many other houses themselves sought to serve under its banner. The late father taught Lion from childhood to lead people, and passed on to him many useful tactical knowledge. Lion's confidence and maturity convinced Ars that before him stood not just a gifted relative of Lilina. Ars understood that Lion wanted to win victories with his own tactics every time Carlos called him to war. The young man confirmed his desire to serve as a tactician and commander in order to earn glory, even without his own army. All future achievements Lion intended to dedicate to the most cherished goal, the revival of the Grem family. Ars accepted him into service alongside himself and immediately tested whether the new assistant could read and count. Besides future battles, the boy asked Lion to help with daily management and to search for former workers of the Grem lands. Lion agreed to invite experienced people to Baruchania, and Ars supported his initiative fraternally. The most valuable for the young domain were to be specialists in territory management, which the local novices were still learning. Lion was stunned that Ars immediately entrusted him with such an important task. The young ruler replied that as the elder brother, he had to help the younger one, and ultimately won Lion's favor. Inspired, the new vassal promised to immediately find the Grem people and bring them to Baruka. During the next inspection of the castle, Ars heard an unfamiliar voice mercilessly call the magnificent building tasteless. Gran recognized the criticism of his own work and instantly flared up with indignation. Ars was surprised by the audacity of the stranger, who calmly mocked the decoration right in the presence of the master. She turned out to be Clarice, who sternly stopped Gran and reminded him to respect Ars. The woman politely introduced herself as Lilina's personal maid and bowed before the future lord. Clarice arrived together with Lion to check the wedding preparations, while Gran was still boiling from her remarks. She suggested removing the overly lavish decoration and replacing it with items more appropriate for a noble castle. Gran began to defend every cabinet and ornament, as he had personally created them as individual masterpieces. Clarice acknowledged his craftsmanship, but explained that an excess of expensive things would turn the entire castle into a shameless display of wealth. In her opinion, such ostentatious luxury would only emphasize Ars's recent and too rapid rise. Clarice assured that she did not intend to offend the master, but Gran still loudly objected to the interference. She warned that contempt for noble tastes would make Ars a laughingstock and drag him into new humiliations. Understanding the bias of both connoisseurs, Clarice asked Ars himself to make the final decision. The boy admitted that he was well versed in practicality, but hardly understood beauty, so he entrusted her with decorating the interior. Despite Claris's assertiveness and Gran's disappointment, Ars agreed to give her control over the decoration. The maid guaranteed a wonderful wedding and a cozy life for the newlyweds, then suggested inviting famous craftsmen to the castle. Claris named the renowned furniture masters Almery and Barbara, whose works were to suitably complement the residents. She believed that the works of great masters would enhance the impression of the unique, stained glass, and the irritated Gran barely restrained himself. There was little time left before the ceremony, and the ready-made famous furniture might not suit the unusual castle at all. Then Ars decided to ask Asen to organize an open selection, to which merchants would bring various decorations. To encourage participants, he introduced quality checks and a certificate confirming good taste and the seller's honesty. The opportunity to gain approval from an influential family attracted merchants who hoped to win the nobility's favor through the award. Claris supported the idea, but reminded that without considering the unique halls, merchants would not know which items would truly fit. After the opening of the Free City, traders were just beginning to arrive, and Asen used new connections to expand the selection. Ars understood that few would risk transporting expensive goods to distant Baruchania without assurance of a safe and profitable sale. The solution was an item that could show merchants the castle without letting them into the not-yet-ready residence. Ars brought an accurate miniature of the building with a facade, tower, and famous stained glass. He proposed distributing small models of the removable audience hall to the traders so they could choose furniture according to its shape and style. Claris was fascinated by the miniature that opened up and showed the interior, and asked to make another one for Lilina. Even Gran admitted that such models would greatly ease the search for decorations that would harmonize with the castle. Lion warned about the danger of revealing the exact layout of the fortress, so it was decided to deliberately alter details inside the models. Ars entrusted making several safe copies, Asen to deliver them to the merchants, and Claris to select the best goods. Gran also joined the jury to help Claris filter out beautiful but impractical items. By the start of the quality inspection, significantly more merchants had arrived in Baruchania than Ars had expected. Even merchants from beyond the lands of Fontana brought their best goods and loudly praised their own taste. A miniature of the castle and an unprecedented stained glass ignited their imagination, as everyone decided that the owner of such a residence would pay generously. The Grammy Award turned the trade into a real celebration, and Ars finally acknowledged the soundness of Carl's and Claris's plans. Before the jury, one after another appeared luxurious chests, intricate furniture, dishes, and amazing mechanisms. Gran was fascinated by the skillful moving doll, but Claris mercilessly rejected the inappropriate toy. The master tried to save the damaged goods by repairing them, while the increasingly long queue of traders awaited their turn. After the joint selection by Gran and Claris, the cluttered reception room received a completely new decoration. Instead of excessive shine, it featured clean lines, comfortable furniture, and restrained noble beauty. Ars recognized the castle as much cozier, although the merciless Claris spent almost all his savings on the transformation. The boy decided to start saving money again after the ceremony, while the trader's inspection came to an end. Asen and Maddock completed the inventory of the selected goods and organized the stacks of documents. Ars thanked both men for their hard work and received a complete list of results. Maddock protected the organizers from problematic merchants, evaluating each participant by 3 strict conditions. The traders had to prove quality, good taste, and honesty, and the best earned the title of 3-star and raised the level of trade in the Free City. Swindlers exposed by Maddock in schemes were sent to prison without hesitation. Ars decided to conduct inspections regularly so that, along with the castle interior, the goods and people of Baruchania would continuously improve. When all preparations were finally completed, guests arrived in the city and the wedding day came. Ars realized that trade guilds in other lands performed a similar quality check, so his innovation filled an important gap. To the church bells, a nervous Lilina appeared at the entrance in her wedding attire. The girl pressed her hands to her chest and froze next to Carlos, gathering courage before the ceremony. The long dress, floral decorations, and attentive Claris gave her appearance a solemn grandeur. Carlos gently said goodbye to Lilina, touching her forehead with his lips before handing her over to the groom. Leaving her brother behind, Lilina took a few uncertain steps alone towards Ars. Ars rode up on horseback with the wedding procession and extended his hand to the bride. Lilina trusted him, placed her palm in his hand, and rose to her future husband. The newlyweds moved forward together, not letting go of each other's hands and hiding their excitement behind quiet smiles. The warm spring wind revived the earth on the very day Ars and Lilina arrived at the festively decorated church. In the crowded temple, they stood before the altar and began the wedding ceremony. Bishop Paulo opened the book and solemnly blessed the union of the young couple before all the guests. Having finished the vows, Ars and Lilina sealed the marriage with a tender kiss. Lilina opened her eyes after the kiss and met the confused but happy gaze of her husband. Already as a married couple, they returned to the guests, holding hands under the gaze of the satisfied Clarice. The newlyweds were surrounded by congratulations, and the colorful light from the giant stained glass flooded their first shared moment. The wedding festivities lasted 3 full days and united relatives, vassals, craftsmen, and residents of Baruchania. After the ceremony, people lined up near the castle for personal congratulations, so Ars barely stood on his feet from exhaustion. Among the guests were many strangers, former farmers, quality control merchants, and visitors of the hot springs. They were especially attracted by the festive food, as the cooks of the Grem family treated every guest with dishes of the highest level. Peasants and commoners rarely tasted such delicacies, so Ars and Lilina did not reproach them for the long feast. Bishop Paulo admitted that he was glad to personally conduct the ceremony, and Ars thanked him for the time amid numerous duties. The clergyman called this marriage the most magnificent of his rituals and noted how easy it had become to travel new roads. Even the experienced bishop was sincerely impressed by the beautiful stained glass of Baruchi Castle. Admiration turned into reproach when Paulo noticed that there was not a single church in the entire castle town. Ars tried to justify himself with the temple in the village of Baruca, but the bishop only smiled suspiciously. Paulo directly asked whether the Lord considered the church unnecessary, and Ars hastily denied such an accusation. The young man assured that he had already allocated land for a new temple, after which the bishop satisfactorily prepared to depart. Ars promised to build a church in the southeastern part of the city, and Lilina supported him as a devoted follower of the gods. Before leaving, Paulo blessed the newlyweds for a happy life together, but suddenly remembered one more important condition. The bishop explained that city churches usually maintained orphanages and asked Ars to definitely provide for such an institution.